In every peaceful town, behind every perfect family portrait, there can be a story no one dares to imagine. It was one of those quiet Italian communities where the days felt predictable, the streets felt safe, and the Del Grande family appeared to be everything a household should be. Hardworking, respected, united, but behind the walls of their elegant home, something far more sinister had been growing for years. An emotional storm centered around one troubled son, and on a cold January night in 1998, that storm finally erupted, leaving a trail of devastation that shook Italy to its core. This is the story of Elia Del Grande, the man who would turn his family home into a massacre scene. Elia Del Grande was raised in a hard-working family. His father, Ennio Del Grande, had always been ambitious, studious, determined, and committed to building something of his own. Through years of dedication, he managed to open and grow a family bakery business that became well known in the area. Shortly after completing his studies, Ennio met Alida, a driven young woman, 5 years his junior. They quickly began a relationship, married soon after, and welcomed their first son, Enrico. 5 years later, their second child, Elia, was born. They did not plan to have more children. They wanted to focus on expanding their business and raising their 2 sons, future heirs to the family enterprise. Enrico grew up intelligent, quiet, and diligent. Elia, on the other hand, was his complete opposite. From early childhood, Elia was energetic, impulsive, and increasingly difficult to control. Even Ennio struggled with his temper. When Elia began attending school, his behavior only worsened. He frequently clashed with classmates, leading the family to consider placing him in a special program for troubled youth. In the end, they decided instead to have him live temporarily with his grandmother and aunt. For 3 years, Elia stayed with his relatives. When he returned home, his parents hoped that the change of environment had made a difference. At first, he seemed calmer, but soon the disruptive behavior resumed. When Elia graduated from school, the family hoped maturity would help him settle down. His parents did everything they could to support him, but their efforts failed. Elia had fallen into alcohol and banned substances use as a teenager, and after graduation, his addictions deepened. The Del Grande family lived together in a large home in Cadrazate, a peaceful town in northern Italy. Locals respected Ennio, Alida, and Enrico for their kindness and work ethic. Elia, however, became famous for all the wrong reasons. By the mid-1992s, his behavior became increasingly dangerous. The turning point came when Elia attacked a taxi driver with a knife, inflicting serious injuries that cost the man an eye. Even then, his parents continued to support him. Yet they also recognized that drastic measures were needed. Because the family owned a property in Santo Domingo, the capital of the Dominican Republic, they decided to send Elia there in hopes that distance and structure would help him turn his life around. At first, the plan seemed promising. Elia found work at a family-run club in Santo Domingo, part of their broader business interests. But soon Ennio and Alida learned that he had begun a relationship with a local woman, someone they believed had the same emotional instability and personal struggles as their son. The entire family opposed the relationship, fearing it would push him further off track. But Elia was stubborn. He insisted on marrying the woman, defying all objections. Every argument with his family ended with him threatening to run away permanently to start a new life with her. Tensions between Elia and his parents grew worse. Their disagreements became constant, and the household atmosphere deteriorated rapidly. Then came January 7, 1998. Its emergency operators received a chilling call that evening. A young man, barely able to speak and gasping for air, reported that someone had broken into the Del Grande home and shot the entire family. Before he could identify himself, The call abruptly ended. The dispatcher, alarmed and confused, immediately alerted the nearest patrol officer several kilometers from the villa. The Del Grande family was well known in the community. He was shocked that a shooting could have occurred in such a quiet, safe neighborhood. But instead of making quick assumptions, he approached cautiously, determined to understand what had really happened. When he reached the villa, everything looked eerily still. The house was dark, silent, no movement visible through the windows. Shortly after the patrol officer arrived, an ambulance pulled up to the address. The officer knocked repeatedly and rang the doorbell, but no one responded. He tried calling back the young man who had placed the emergency call, but the first attempt went unanswered. He dialed several more times. On the final call, someone picked up, yet no words followed. All he could hear was strained, panicked breathing. As if the caller was unable to speak, the situation clearly appeared dire. The officer decided he could not wait any longer. He forced open the door and stepped inside the house. Unsure whether the shooter was still present, he called for backup and moved cautiously forward with his weapon drawn. A quick sweep of the ground floor revealed nothing, so he proceeded upstairs. There, lying in a pool of blood near a telephone, he found a young man, 27-year-old Enrico Del Grande. Though gravely wounded, he was still alive. Emergency responders provided first aid and rushed him to the hospital. But he died shortly afterward. As the officer continued examining the home, he noticed heavy bloodstains across the living room and hallway. Following the trail, he reached the master bedroom. Beside the bed lay 53-year-old Alida Del Grande, already deceased from a gunshot wound. The room bore clear signs of a struggle. Items scattered across the floor and overturned objects indicated she had fought desperately for her life. But to no avail. The search continued through the villa until the officer reached the garage. There, next to the family car, he found the body of 58-year-old Enea Del Grande, the patriarch of the family. He had been shot multiple times in the back and head. He had died before help arrived. One person, however, was missing: the youngest son, Elia. Investigators searched the property, but he was nowhere to be found. Inside the house, they quickly noticed that one firearm from Enea's hunting rifle collection was missing. The caliber matched the bullets used in the killings. Shell casings were scattered near the victims, and an empty ammunition box was discovered in a closet. Yet far more rounds were missing than had been fired. Whoever committed the murders had fled heavily armed. Local residents were warned immediately. At first, authorities feared that the killer might have taken Elia hostage. Early speculation suggested a burglary gone wrong, but that theory quickly collapsed. Aside from the missing rifle, nothing valuable had been taken. Jewelry, electronics, cash, all untouched. There were no signs of forced entry on any door or window. These facts pointed to one conclusion: this was not a robbery. It was personal. And driven by hatred, the search for 22-year-old Elia Del Grande escalated rapidly. Within hours, the scenario shifted from a potential kidnapping to a manhunt for the primary and only suspect. Carabinieri investigators began gathering background information on the family, and the picture that emerged was troubling. These suspicions were reinforced when investigators confirmed Elia had a previous criminal record for a particularly brutal incident involving a taxi driver. When police interviewed the man who survived that attack, he recounted the event with visible emotion. It occurred shortly after Elia turned 17. The man, a local driver well known to the Del Grande family, had often driven Elia home after nights out. On that night, Elia had been agitated from the moment he got into the car. The driver, familiar with Elia's volatile temper, tried not to provoke him and remained silent. It made no difference. Without warning or apparent reason, Elia suddenly lunged at him, stabbing him repeatedly and inflicting injuries so severe that the driver lost an eye. The incident deeply alarmed investigators and raised serious concerns about Elia's mental stability. While searching his room, police uncovered a large collection of bladed weapons. Those who knew him described this fascination as an obsession. He owned nearly 100 knives of various shapes, sizes. Former classmates and teachers recalled him as impulsive, easily provoked, frequently involved in conflicts both inside and outside of school. He also gravitated toward extremist circles and was known to have associated with a group of local skinheads. Investigators soon discovered that the Del Grande family had tried everything to help him, yet nothing seemed to make a lasting difference. In an effort to pull their son out of his downward spiral, his parents eventually made a drastic decision. They sent Elia to Santo Domingo. The family owned several properties there, including a nightclub that was popular with locals. They believed that distancing him from the troubled friendships he had formed in Italy would give him a fresh start. At first, the change of scenery seemed promising. Elia found work at the family's nightclub, and for a brief period his parents hoped he might eventually take a stable role in the business. But those hopes quickly faded. The nightclub scene was no less problematic than the environment he had left behind. It attracted all kinds of questionable characters, and hard-banned substances were readily available. It was there. Investigators believe that Elia, who had previously used only softer substances, began experimenting with much more dangerous ones. Even worse, he soon became involved with a young Dominican woman who works as an escort, servicing truck drivers. Instead of keeping his distance, Elia became infatuated with her and immersed himself in a chaotic lifestyle. Elia began financially supporting the woman, hoping she might leave escort. He paid for everything: her food, rent, clothing, and mounting personal debts. Month after month, he poured more money into the relationship for Elia. His obsession with the young woman soon became as consuming as his fascination with weapons. Initially, he tried to hide the relationship from his family, but they quickly noticed that Elia's spending had spiraled out of control. He was wasting large sums not only on the woman but also on prohibited substances and other illegal activities. Concerned, his older brother Enrico traveled to Santo Domingo to confront him. When Enrico discovered the full extent of the situation, he immediately informed their parents. They insisted Elia return to Italy. But by then he refused to leave the Dominican Republic. Tensions within the family escalated. After Enrico's failed attempt to bring Elia home, Elia wrote an angry letter in which he openly expressed contempt for his parents and hinted that things would end badly if they continued interfering in his life. Still, the Del Grande family was determined. Shortly before Christmas 1997, they finally convinced Elia to return to Italy. But once he arrived back home, arguments resumed almost immediately, always revolving around the same topic: the woman from Santo Domingo. No one in the family wanted her entering their lives or their home. The hostility continued to grow, and Elia's resentment intensified. According to the reconstructed timeline, on the evening of January 6, 1998, Elia and his parents went to a local pizzeria for dinner. There, he once again brought up his desire to return to the Dominican Republic to marry the woman. He insisted he planned to wed her on January 10. To his parents, this sounded reckless and dangerous. Exhausted by his behavior, they struggled to stay calm. They had no intention of allowing their son to marry an escort. A heated argument erupted once more. Elia left abruptly and did not return home with his parents. Instead, he went to visit a friend, 33-year-old Pier Angelo, a stable hand from Vergiate and one of Elia's longtime acquaintances. This visit was no coincidence. Pier Angelo later told investigators that they spent most of the night drinking and talking. But this was not completely true. Elia had taken prohibited substances and left around 3 a.m. Agitated and fueled by anger, Pier admitted that Elia talked about wanting revenge that night. But he insisted he had not taken the threats seriously. In his words, Elia's dark, Sarcastic humor often blurred the line between a joke and something far more sinister. Further investigation revealed that after returning home, Elia immediately seized one of his father's rifles. He loaded the weapon and headed straight to his parents' bedroom. He fired 2 shots at his mother and 2 more at his father. Though gravely wounded, his father managed to stagger toward the garage in a desperate attempt to escape. His mother tried to fight back, but she was overpowered almost instantly. Elia then moved to the living room, where his older brother, Enrico, was asleep. Enrico had already been jolted awake by the gunfire. He was shot twice as well. After he lost consciousness, Elia began staging the scene as a robbery. He scattered various objects throughout the house, took one of the family rifles along with ammunition, and fled the home. Despite his injuries, Enrico managed to call emergency services. In the hours that followed, Elia contacted several acquaintances and transferred yet another large sum of money to his girlfriend in the Dominican Republic. By dawn, he was already inside a taxi headed toward the Swiss border. His flight was short-lived, thanks to a rapid international alert. Swiss authorities stopped him at a border checkpoint. His strange demeanor raised immediate suspicion, and the guards detained him before notifying the Italian Carabinieri. Shortly thereafter, Elia was interrogated. He confessed to the triple homicide almost immediately. What shocked investigators most was his utter lack of remorse. His behavior from the very beginning suggested profound psychological instability. Mental health professionals evaluated him and diagnosed him with borderline personality disorder. He struggled with explosive anger, impulsivity, and a severe dependence on hard prohibited substances, yet no one had ever ensured he received treatment in a specialized facility. When speaking about his past, Elia often described the family environment as far from harmonious. Contrary to the image the Del Grande family presented to the outside world, he recalled with bitterness the years he spent living with his grandmother and aunt, describing them as a time of deep loneliness. According to him, both women resorted to physical punishment to control him. He said, feeling unloved and mistreated had caused lasting psychological trauma. Elia portrayed his mother not as a warm, affectionate figure, but as a harsh, controlling woman who used yelling, insults, and physical discipline to enforce her rules. His father, he claimed, was no different. Psychiatric experts later testified that such an upbringing, combined with his personality traits, could have contributed to his chronic low self-esteem, emotional instability, and the persistent feeling of being judged or monitored. These factors, together with his escalating substance abuse, likely accelerated his psychological decline. After his first trial, Elia Del Grande received 3 life sentences. However, during the appeal, the court reduced the sentence to 30 years, ruling that he was only partially sane at the time of the killings. Even in prison, Elia's behavior continued to deteriorate. He attempted to escape multiple times and provoked frequent conflicts despite the high security conditions. One escape attempt actually succeeded, though only briefly. Investigators later concluded that he may have been assisted by his common-law wife, whom he had met while on a semi-open prison regime. A taxi driver proved instrumental in identifying him. He had been paid 400 euros by a woman to pick up someone outside the prison perimeter. During the ride, the driver noticed that the passenger kept hiding his face. Suspicious, he went to the police after completing the trip, helping authorities track down and recapture Elia. Elia was captured while trying to reach Sardinia and received an additional 8-month sentence. In practice, though, it made little difference, because he did not end up serving the full 30 years. Then came an unexpected, highly controversial development. In 2025, after serving just 25 years, Elia was granted early release, transferred to a semi-open facility in Olbia, Sardinia. The decision sparked immediate outrage. Residents were furious and frightened at the prospect of living near a man who had killed his entire family and who had repeatedly shown he was capable of violence. And almost immediately, Elia validated their fears. From the very first days, it became clear that he could not adjust to ordinary life. He frequently argued with neighbors, clashed with residents, and provoked multiple complaints. Some said he harassed people. Others insisted he was simply too dangerous to be living freely within the community. As a result, his freedom was restricted once again. A court ordered him to spend 6 months in a work-release facility in Castelfranco Emilia, in the province of Modena, after which his case would be reviewed again. This institution was a mixed facility where inmates of different profiles lived together. At the time of Elia's transfer, around 40 individuals classified as dangerous to society were housed there, along with another 45 prisoners in various stages of social reintegration. Many had already been granted semi-freedom, which allowed them to go into town each day for work. The decision to house a convicted triple murderer in such an environment was met with significant criticism. Even law enforcement officers acknowledged that criminals with vastly different behavioral patterns require different levels of supervision. That reality soon became painfully clear. On the evening of October 30, 2025, Elia managed to escape. Using a makeshift rope crafted from electrical cords taken from household appliances, he lowered himself from a window located on the only side of the building, not protected by fencing. No one realized he was gone until the next morning's head count. Surveillance cameras captured his escape. A large-scale search operation began immediately. But the first hours yielded nothing. No inmates in the facility appeared to know anything about Elia's plan, and he left behind no obvious clues. After examining his background, detectives concluded that he was likely still in Italy, probably hiding in areas familiar to him. Patrols searched roads, bus terminals, train stations, rural paths, and abandoned farmhouses. Dozens of CCTV recordings were collected, but none led to him. Then Elia reached out himself. On November 6, Novosti Varese received a letter signed by Elia Del Grande. In it, he attempted to justify his escape. He expressed remorse for his past actions but insisted he could not remain in the workhouse. He criticized the reintegration facility, describing it as a poor imitation of a real prison, one that lacked meaningful rehabilitation programs. He claimed that psychotropic medications and prohibited substances circulated freely inside, and that many inmates were forced to remain far longer than necessary simply because they had no home or family waiting for them outside. According to Elia, his escape was not an attempt to avoid punishment, but a choice driven by desperation, a way to spend the rest of his life in a more peaceful place. The letter ignited nationwide debate. On one hand, complaints about such institutions had existed for years. On the other, a man who had murdered his entire family was openly on the run and considered extremely dangerous. Authorities intensified their search. Eventually, investigators traced Elia to Lake Monate. Under cover of darkness, he used a pedal boat to cross the lake, temporarily eluding patrols on the ground. But his efforts only delayed the inevitable. After 13 days on the run, on November 12, 2025, officers located him hiding in a small house near his childhood home in Cadrazate. He offered no resistance when arrested. The investigation into his escape is still ongoing, as detectives suspect he did not act alone. Now 50 years old, Elia Del Grande has been returned to custody. Even so, Elia is expected to be released again in just 4 years. His case has sparked national reflection, not only about public safety, but also about the structure and limitations of the Italian justice system. One question remains at the center of the debate. Can someone who murdered his entire family ever truly reintegrate into society? Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of Maribel Ramos. California is one of the most prominent states in the United States, known for its warm climate, beautiful beaches, and world-class entertainment industry. Many come to California with hopes of building a better life. However, not everyone achieves their dreams. For some, California can be a land of promise, but for others, it presents harsh challenges. Maribel Ramos had a long-term goal of entering law enforcement. However, she needed to obtain a higher education, and to afford that, she joined the military. Maribel served 2 combat tours in Iraq and planned to graduate from California State University, Fullerton, with a degree in criminal justice. A veteran of the U.S. Army, she had served for 8 years and was looking forward to returning to civilian life. Maribel knew her goals and was determined to achieve them. After her military service, she shifted her focus to new opportunities, including her desire to enroll at a university in California. Orange, California, where she lived until her mother's passing in 2009. Then, Maribel reached out to her sister, Lucy, asking if she could move in with her. Lucy declined, explaining that she and her daughter were settled in a different location, but she would consider moving in with Maribel if she was unable to find a roommate. To find a roommate, Maribel placed an advertisement and soon received several responses. One inquiry stood out, a man named Kwang Choi Joy, who described himself as seeking a place to stay while job hunting. After meeting Kwang, both Maribel and Lucy found him to be calm and educated. He mentioned to the sisters that he had never been married and had no children. After Kwang moved in with Maribel, it quickly became evident that he was quite isolated. He spent a lot of time alone at home and rarely ventured outside. To help him connect, Maribel started inviting Kwang to family gatherings, dinners, games, and parties, where he met many of her relatives. Over time, Maribel began to change her routine and started participating in a weekly softball game, which was unusual for her. On May 2013, she disappeared when she failed to show up for a scheduled event. Maribel's family and friends made several attempts to reach her, but none were successful. They checked her apartment but found no sign of her. Concerned, they reported her missing, prompting the authorities to launch an investigation. Police officers visited Maribel's apartment but received no response after knocking on the door. Everything outside seemed normal, with no signs of trouble. There were no broken windows or indications of a break-in. As a result, the officers decided to enter the apartment to search for Maribel. There were no indications of a crime at Maribel's home. A search revealed that she was not packing for a trip. All her clothes were neatly in place, except for her mobile phone, wallet, and identification. Since Maribel's car was parked outside, investigators had their suspicions. Maribel was not the kind of person to vanish without a trace, which raised concerns that she might be in danger. When investigators arrived, Kwang Choi Joy unexpectedly approached them. He mentioned that he had last seen Maribel the previous night around 10 p.m. when he returned from a walk. In the video from the surveillance camera that evening at 8:15 p.m., Maribel had received a check for her apartment, which was the last time she was seen in public. She calmly accepted the envelope and left, showing no signs of fear or urgency. At that time, Maribel's family turned to social media for assistance. They shared a photo of Maribel online, asking anyone with information about her to reach out. They aimed to engage as many people as possible in the search. Meanwhile, investigators attempted to track Maribel's mobile phone, but it had been turned off. During their investigation, the police learned that Maribel had recently started dating a man named Paul Lopez. He was the last person to speak with her on the phone the day before she went missing. As a result, the police asked Paul to come to the station for questioning. Paul appeared confident and explained that he and Maribel were still in the early stages of their relationship. He also mentioned that he was dating other women. When asked if Maribel was seeing anyone else, Paul said he had not inquired about that. He confirmed that he spoke with Maribel on Thursday evening, and noted that he was working a shift from 4 p.m. until midnight that day, so they did not meet in person. Investigators observed that while he was cooperative, there was no assurance that he was being truthful. However, Paul's truck had a GPS tracker, allowing officers to monitor his movements that night. The data revealed that Paul was not near Maribel's home. Paul mentioned Maribel's roommate Kwang, noting that their relationship had recently deteriorated. He recounted that Maribel often complained about Kwang's inability to pay rent on time. During a conversation, Paul overheard Maribel tell Kwang that she wanted him to move out the next day. In a speakerphone call, Paul warned Kwang that he would be kicked out if he didn't leave as instructed. Paul offered to help Maribel and said he would come over if she needed assistance, but she declined, stating it wasn't necessary. This was their final conversation. After the conflict between Maribel and Kwang became known, investigators learned that Kwang, who was 54 years old, had moved to the United States from South Korea as a teenager. He had no significant criminal record, and there was nothing indicating any illegal activities in his past. However, further investigation uncovered a history of anger issues. Kwang's sister had once filed a complaint against him due to his volatile temper. While examining his social media, investigators noted that Kwang and Maribel Ramos appeared to share a close bond. Nevertheless, when they spoke with Maribel's family, they learned that her relationship with Kwang was not as ideal as it seemed in their social media photos. It appeared that although they shared a friendly relationship, Kwang desired something deeper. In the summer of 2012, Lucy received a call from Kwang, who admitted that he was in love with Maribel and was trying to find her because of this. Lucy later informed Maribel about the conversation and urged her to promptly reject Kwang's feelings before things escalated. Maribel then spoke with Kwang, making it clear that she did not have romantic feelings for him. At first, Kwang seemed to handle the rejection well. However, as time passed, he began taking extreme actions to win Maribel over. He changed his wardrobe, got a tattoo, and spent over $10,000 on plastic surgery to appear younger. Police discovered alarming evidence, a frantic phone call from Maribel to them just 12 days before she went missing. In the call, Maribel expressed that she felt unsafe around her roommate. To understand the relationship between Maribel and Kwang, investigators brought him in for questioning. He appeared calm and friendly, expressing concern over her disappearance. Kwang claimed they had been roommates for about a year and a half, sharing enjoyable experiences like cruises, dancing, and parties. However, investigators suspected that the reality was not as ideal as Kwang portrayed it, and pressed him to explain Maribel's 911 call. Kwang mentioned that he and Maribel went to karaoke that night and ended up arguing. He noted that Maribel's behavior when drinking alcohol could be either very friendly or aggressive. When detectives asked about the argument, Kwang mentioned that it occurred on Thursday evening and was about the rent. He believed the detectives should investigate further, since he last saw Maribel at 9 p.m. when he took a drive to cool off after their disagreement. When he returned, she was missing, and he thought someone might have taken her away, because her car was still in its place. Although Kwang's account seemed believable, some aspects of his appearance raised suspicions. He claimed he had scratched himself on bushes while walking in the park, which seemed odd. At this stage of the investigation, there was no evidence that Kwang was involved in Maribel's disappearance. As days passed, the search for Maribel became increasingly difficult, and the likelihood of finding her alive decreased. To uncover new evidence, detectives decided to involve forensic experts to thoroughly examine Maribel's home, hoping they would find clues that were previously overlooked. During this time, Kwang cooperated with the police, allowing them to search his rented car without a warrant, including a detailed inspection by a police dog trained to detect human remains. However, the dog did not find any traces in the house or the vehicles. Meanwhile, a few days after Maribel's disappearance, Kwang expressed his feelings of missing his friend on forums dedicated to the case. Despite his attempts to portray himself as a grieving roommate, Kwang began to distance himself from Maribel's family, whom he had previously considered friends. He also declined to participate in most vigils and searches for her. This behavior raised red flags for investigators, who hoped he would slip up and reveal information about Maribel. Kwang visited a public library to use the internet since he had given his phone and laptop to the police. Detectives requested surveillance footage, which showed nothing unusual. He used the laptop for about 2 hours before returning it. They were eager to check the browser history on the laptop, but it had been cleared to protect users' privacy after it was returned, adding to the police's frustrations as they continued their efforts to find Maribel. Maribel's family were devastated when Maribel went missing, and no one knew where she had gone or what had happened to her. In their desperation, her family put up flyers throughout the city, hoping someone might have seen her or have information about her whereabouts. However, this effort was not enough. Realizing they needed to reach a wider audience, they created a social media account to share Maribel's situation and ask for help from anyone who might know something about Maribel. For 2 weeks, the police had no leads on her disappearance. Then, an unexpected development occurred. Maribel's family announced on social media that they would organize a walk and search for her in Modjeska Canyon. At that time, detectives discovered that Kwang had returned the rented car, which raised their suspicions. They decided to search the car again. During the first search, the police dog did not detect any scent, but this time it quickly reacted to a smell coming from the trunk. While this evidence was not enough to make an arrest, it indicated to the detectives that they were on the right track. When Kwang went to the library to use the laptop again, he saw on Facebook that Maribel's family was organizing a walk-and-search event in Modjeska Canyon. Unbeknownst to him, the police had obtained a warrant that allowed them to remotely access the laptop he was using. Detectives were able to see his search history, which included queries about how long it takes for a human body to decompose. He also looked up the location in the canyon where Maribel's family planned to gather for the search. After searching on Google Maps, he zoomed in and out of the area, which was 10 miles away from Modjeska Canyon. The officers following his actions were shocked. It became clear that Kwang had inadvertently revealed to them the location where he had hidden Maribel's body. Investigators quickly arrived at a remote area with no nearby houses. After searching for 30 minutes, they discovered a shallow grave. While they suspected the remains belonged to Maribel, they needed forensic confirmation before arresting Kwang. Forensic experts confirmed the victim's identity using dental records. The remains were indeed those of Maribel Ramos. Due to various animals in the environment, determining the exact cause of death was not possible. When Kwang noticed the approaching officers, he attempted to escape by jumping out of a window, but was apprehended and taken to the police station. He continued to deny any involvement in Maribel's disappearance, unaware that the police had already identified her remains. Kwang was charged with multiple offenses. Maribel's family continued to cherish her memory, yet it became clear that the circumstances surrounding her death were too uncertain to reach a conclusion. Authorities could only speculate on how she might have died at Kwang's hands. Prosecutors claimed that Kwang was in love with Maribel, while she did not reciprocate his feelings. Given Maribel's combat training, which could have allowed her to easily overpower Kwang in a fair fight, it was assumed he must have set up an attack. Investigators believed he entered her room during the night and suffocated her while she slept. He then reportedly placed her body in the trunk of his rented car and drove to a secluded spot where he had to crawl under a taut wire. Although there was a possibility that he moved Maribel's body multiple times, there was no evidence to support that theory. Additionally, very little forensic evidence connected Kwang to the crime. In court, Kwang did not plead guilty. He expressed that he would not apologize for something he insisted he did not do. He stated that he had never searched for the grave's location in the canyon and suggested that someone was framing him. He claimed he had nothing to contribute and maintained that he was not involved in Maribel's death. Kwong proposed that Maribel might have died from an illness after years of struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder and feelings of paranoia. The prosecutors acknowledged that the case was largely circumstantial, highlighting that key evidence included a library search that focused on the specific area where Maribel's body was discovered. He was held in the Orange County Jail on a $1 million bail. In July 2014, the court found Kwong Choi-joy guilty of murdering Maribel Ramos. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He continues to maintain his innocence. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Laura Salmon. On May 31, 1984, an elderly farmer named Johnny Muckle came to the Rutherford County Sheriff's Office. He reported that he had been driving through his field and noticed something unusual. As he got closer, he discovered a girl lying dead in the field, her face covered in blood. Alarmed, he immediately contacted the police without disturbing the scene. Several officers, including the sheriff, accompanied him back to the scene where they found the body of a blonde girl. She was wearing only her bra, as the rest of her clothing had been removed. The perpetrator had covered her with 2 pairs of jeans, one for women and one for men, and wrapped a black jacket around her upper body, with one sleeve tied tightly around her neck. The police found the entire scene unusual. They had never encountered anything like it in their many years of service. The autopsy revealed that the victim was clutching her underwear in her right hand, and her jeans were identified as part of her clothing. She had suffered multiple injuries, the most serious of which was to her head. Interestingly, Johnny reported that the girl's body was discovered near an abandoned quarry. This location is known to attract students from nearby educational institutions who often gather there to drink and socialize. It is possible that one of these gatherings ended in a violent incident, which is currently under investigation. While this information guides the investigation, it also expands the list of potential suspects to hundreds of juveniles. In order to focus on more specific suspects, additional data collection and analysis are required. The victim was identified as Laura Salmon, 18, a freshman at Middle Tennessee State University located in her hometown of Murfreesboro. Laura attended Oakland High School, where her mother, Lorene Mackey, taught English. Her parents were divorced at the time. Just days before the incident, Laura had moved in with her father because the school year had ended. She missed him and was going to spend part of the holiday with him. Laura was a kind, attractive, and sociable girl who enjoyed attending lively gatherings. As a young woman, she was crowned Little Miss Murfreesboro and showcased her acting talents in summer plays at the local theater. Laura was also very intelligent, graduating with honors and planning to continue her studies at college to build a solid career. She had started attending the local university in the fall of 1983, just 6 months before the tragic incident. She had just started a relationship with her boyfriend, David Kyle Gilley. Laura was well-liked and had no enemies who wanted to harm her. Police believed she may have been a random murder victim. An autopsy was completed on June 2, 1984. The forensic expert found at least 2 blunt force injuries to her head, likely caused by a rock or similar object. These blows resulted in brain damage. Laura suffered fatal head injuries from the repeated attacks. She lost consciousness and died within 10 minutes, and even immediate medical attention could not save her. Initially, there were concerns about the possibility that Laura had been abused, but the forensic results found no signs of this. However, the expert pointed out that Laura had been consensual in her intimate relations within 24 to 48 hours before the incident. It is believed that she may have had a boyfriend. It is possible the attacker staged the crime scene to mislead the police. Forensic teams collected samples from the clothing covering her body for further analysis. Additionally, tire tracks found in the area could belong to either Laura's car or the attacker's car, prompting the police to examine Laura's vehicle. One of the officers knew Laura. She worked as a cashier at a grocery store he frequented after work. He recognized her car and decided to check the store's parking lot. On June 3, he found Laura's car abandoned in the lot, which was subsequently taken to the lab for examination. When the forensic team examined the interior, they found no fingerprints, not even Laura's. This was unusual, indicating that the car may have been thoroughly cleaned, possibly by the perpetrator. However, they did find dirt in the wheel wells and some hairs of unknown origin under the floor mat. These samples were collected for analysis. The soil found in the wheel wells matched the particles on the floor mats of the driver and passenger areas, and when compared to the materials found at the crime scene, they matched as well. Evidence clearly showed that the tire tracks near the crime scene belonged to Laura's car, suggesting that the killer was not a random stranger, but someone who knew her well, including her workplace. As police gathered and analyzed the information, they interviewed people close to Laura, starting with her mother, Lorene Mackey. Lorene immediately suspected her daughter's boyfriend, David, because she was aware of the toxic nature of their relationship and had never supported it. She described David as jealous and possessive, almost like a stalker. Lorene noted that many of Laura's encounters with David ended in arguments. This was extremely distressing to her, as she felt her daughter was ignoring important warning signs. Despite the efforts of several family members, including Laura's father, they were unable to convince Laura that David was a danger. Tragically, this may have contributed to Laura's early death. At that time, personal relationship issues were not considered matters for the police to handle. People generally believed that they should resolve such matters themselves. The police spoke with Lorene's mother and then met with her father and stepmother. Lorene stated that she had last spoken to Laura on the morning of May 31, just a few days before the body was discovered. On that day, Laura had slept over at her friend Trina's house, and they were together until late at night. On the morning of June 1, the girls slept in and woke up around 9 a.m. They then left. Laura went to work at the store, where she was scheduled to work until lunchtime. Trina was supposed to replace her at 2 p.m., after which Laura planned to check her semester grades and then go swimming at her grandmother's pool. However, when Trina arrived at the store around 1 p.m., she discovered that Laura was not there. Her coworkers said that Laura had taken time off and left early. Laura was wearing the same jeans that were found on her body. Laura's car was discovered at work at 3:30 p.m., which was unusual since she was not there. It is unclear when she arrived because there were no surveillance cameras at that time. Laura's father, Salman, last saw his daughter and confirmed that she was with her friend Trina that day. The two girls had been friends since childhood and worked together at the grocery store. Trina helped piece together the events of May 31 and supported Laura's family's concerns. She knew that Laura was afraid of her boyfriend David because he was harassing her, making him a suspect in Laura's murder. Laura had begun talking to other guys because she wanted to break up with David, but was too afraid to tell him directly. She tried to avoid him to signal that their relationship was over. Laura often expressed feeling unsafe around her ex-boyfriend, who was violent towards her, and her fears were well-founded. David Kyle Gillies' behavior became increasingly cruel, making the situation unacceptable. Several co-workers at the grocery store confirmed that Laura and David had a very bad relationship. Witnesses reported that David would come to the store to accuse Laura of cheating and harass her. He used harsh words and even resorted to hitting Laura. David was very possessive. When questioned at the police station, he claimed that Laura was swimming with her grandmother and that he had not seen her. He did not mention their previous encounter before the incident. Witnesses reported seeing Laura with a man in her car that day. After they left together, Laura's car reappeared in the parking lot, but she was missing. No one saw her arrive or park, suggesting that the killer may have left the car there. The police had no evidence against David, so they released him. Unfortunately, the conversation with him was not recorded, A week later, David was questioned again, this time about the last day he spent with Laura. David said that they had a good time on May 30 and that they had not argued. They left Laura's grandmother's apartment at around 9 p.m. in his car, parked behind a church, and were intimate. He then drove her back to her grandmother's house, and they left at around 2 a.m. in separate cars. David went to work, believing that Laura had returned to her father's house. He left work at 7 a.m. and went straight to bed, waking up at 3 p.m. He claimed that he was home during the murder, and his father supported his alibi. The next interview took place in July. David added to his previous claim that after they were intimate, they used jeans in his car to clean up. This detail seemed odd, and the inconsistencies in his testimony raised suspicions, but there was still no evidence against him. The police worked to piece together a timeline of events leading up to the murder. They discovered that on May 30, Laura had been dancing with a man at a nightclub. It was later revealed that the man was one of Laura's friends and that he had a verified alibi for the time of the murder. A new suspect emerged when a Nashville woman reported being abused. During the attack, the attacker mentioned a woman named Laura, threatening to hurt her like he did Laura if she resisted or reported him. During the investigation, police discovered that the suspect also attended the same college as Laura, frequented the gym where she worked out, and often saw her at campus parties. He was also near the school on the day of the murder. Police compared hair found in Laura's car to that of the new suspect. However, DNA analysis at the time was insufficient to make a definitive match. The new suspect was eventually ruled out because the hair samples found in Laura's car did not match him, and he had a solid alibi. As the investigation continued to stall, Laura's parents grew increasingly concerned that the search for the killer might be stalled as well. Concerns about the investigation were confirmed over time due to several police errors. The crime scene was not properly secured, and police collected evidence without using gloves, which could have contaminated it. When Laura's father arrived at the area where his daughter's body was found, he noticed her necklace, which the police had overlooked. He took it to the police station, further cementing his belief that the police had been careless in their investigation. Sadly, Laura's family was right. It took 16 years for the investigation to progress. The case became one of many unsolved cold cases. It wasn't until 2000 that a police team was formed to reinvestigate Laura's case and finally identify her killer. For police officer Dan Goodwin, it was a personal matter because he knew Laura. They had been in college together and had gone to the movies with friends just 4 days before her death. During his first meeting with Laura's family, Goodwin promised to uncover the truth behind her death. Eventually, the police gained access to advanced technology that allowed them to re-examine old evidence. They sent the clothing found on Laura's body to a lab to create a DNA profile. While reviewing Laura's file, the police found a note that contradicted the alibi of Laura's ex-boyfriend, David Kyle Gilley, who claimed he was home at the time of Laura's murder. It was discovered that the police had a witness who contradicted David's alibi. During this time, David's stepfather insisted that he was home, but a woman reported seeing him in a car near the field where Laura's body was found. The woman was located and reinterrogated, confirming her previous account from years earlier and providing the police with fairly accurate details. She stated that the young man she saw driving Laura's car that day had a blank expression on his face and closely resembled the photo of David that had appeared in the newspaper at the time of the murder. In the new investigation, police spoke to Laura's friends, who described David's anxious behavior after the incident. They noted that he appeared to have no remorse for Laura's death and even spoke arrogantly about her. A new witness revealed that at a party, David confessed to her that he had committed the murder during a private conversation. He had threatened her and expressed a desire to attack her, warning that he would harm her if she did not comply. Fortunately, another friend intervened and scared David away. Meanwhile, forensic experts tested the evidence on the clothing and discovered that the blood was Laura's, The only remaining question was about the semen found on the jeans. They needed a biological sample from David for comparison. Unfortunately, he had moved away, so the police began looking for him. David had relocated to Florida in 1986. He was twice divorced, had a daughter, and worked for the Department of Public Works. David also had a criminal record that included abuse, attempted burglary, and resisting arrest, fitting the profile of someone who might have harmed Laura. After meeting with the police, David significantly changed his story. He denied being intimate with Laura the day before the murder and claimed that he had never been jealous or used physical violence. The police obtained a warrant for David's arrest, allowing them to collect all the necessary documents for DNA analysis and comparison with the evidence. On May 31, 2000, laboratory tests confirmed that the blood on David's jeans belonged to both Laura and him. It was likely that he had been wearing the jeans during the crime, as both Laura's and his blood were found on the fabric. The police had suspected David from the beginning of the investigation, and it took months of additional testing to confirm their theories. Unfortunately, it took 17 years to officially prove his guilt. In November 2001, David attended another interview where he contradicted his previous statements. He claimed that he had never had a serious relationship with Laura, describing their interactions as light flirting. He asserted that he had never affected her emotionally or physically, was not jealous, and did not control her actions. This was in direct contradiction to the accounts of many witnesses who disagreed with him. His only admission was that the jeans found on Laura's body were likely his, but he claimed that he had accidentally left them there. These inconsistencies in his testimony provided enough evidence to charge him. By the time the interview ended, David realized he was in trouble and asked for a lawyer. He was arrested on the night of November 14, 2001, and charged with first-degree murder. After the murder, procedural issues arose because David was under 18 at the time of the crime. His case, which involved an adult, was transferred to juvenile court. In 2002, preliminary hearings were held to decide whether the case should be transferred to adult district court. On February 1, 2002, it was finally decided that he would be tried as an adult. During the next preliminary hearing, challenges arose regarding the selection of witnesses for both the prosecution and the defense. The prosecutor's office wanted several of Laura's friends, as well as her mother, to testify before the grand jury. After lengthy discussions, the witness list was finalized. The trial began 22 years after Laura Salmon's death. On August 26, 2006, David Kyle Gilley had been in prison for 5 years awaiting trial. Multiple witnesses testified, revealing the extent of the cruelty he had shown toward Laura throughout their relationship. Disturbing incidents were recounted. Several witnesses reported hearing David make threats out of jealousy. He assaulted Laura, causing her injuries, including a broken nose, and even threatened the dormitory manager at her college. On one occasion, after a heated argument, he nearly threw Laura down a flight of stairs, but the presence of witnesses may have prevented him from causing serious injury. In high school, classmates witnessed David's abusive behavior toward Laura. He assaulted her by slamming her head into a metal cabinet, pushing her against a wall, and slapping her. When Laura expressed a desire to break up, David locked her in a cabinet and banged on the door from the outside. Others heard him threaten to kill her if they broke up. One evening, while playing near the quarry where Laura was later found, friends saw David break her nose by slamming her face into the hood of a car. One of Laura's friends reported the abuse to the police, but there was no record of any law enforcement action taken. Laura felt her complaint was ignored, even when she went to the police station with a broken nose. Laura wanted to end her relationship with David, but he sent her letters threatening to kill her if she tried. He was extremely possessive, believing that if she was not his, she did not deserve to live. Laura's mother did not know the full extent of David's cruelty, but tried to persuade her daughter to break up with him, feeling that their relationship was unhealthy. She suspected that jealousy may have been the motive behind the eventual murder. Laura was a year older than David, and he became increasingly jealous as she started college and moved to a school where she made new friends and socialized with other boys. The prosecutor's office reported that David was with Laura on the day of the attack, while she was on her way to her grandmother's house to swim. The attacker intended to lure her to a remote area to punish her for seeing another boy. There, they got into a fight, during which David wrestled her to the ground and pinned her down, using his body to restrain her. He then began hitting her on the head with whatever object he could find, which unfortunately included several large stones, causing the young girl to suffer serious injuries and die. In response, the defense argued that the genes found on Laura contained DNA from David, Laura, and an unidentified person, suggesting that David may have been framed. The attorney emphasized that David had criticized the police for bias during the investigation. David's brother testified on his behalf, providing a strong alibi. During cross-examination, police discovered that David's brother had been in contact with David while he was in prison. The brothers discussed ways to get David released, leading to the creation of an elaborate alibi that was exposed at the hearing. David Kyle Gilley was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He is currently incarcerated, and his defense attorneys have filed multiple appeals against the verdict, all of which have been rejected. Initially, the murder of Laura Salmon did not attract significant public attention. 4 months after the horrific incident, the tragedy was widely reported in the media. The case sparked a national discussion about domestic violence. Since 1984, various measures have been taken to strengthen protections for women facing violence in their relationships. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Emily Godest. On the evening of November 9, 2007, Johan and Emily were driving on a small country road in Châtenay, France. It was a typical trip for them until he noticed a large dark object suddenly darting across the road. He reacted, but he wasn't quick enough. The car skidded into a ditch and crashed into a tree. After the collision, Johan tried to help his girlfriend, Emily. The car was damaged and caught fire. She was engulfed in flames and fell to the ground, suffering severe injuries that left almost half of her body burned beyond recognition. Despite her condition, she was still alive, so he immediately called for emergency services and waited for the paramedics and police to arrive. While Emily suffered life-threatening injuries, Johan only had minor injuries. Emergency services quickly arrived at the scene. Emily was a history student with dreams of becoming a teacher. She was known for her bright and sociable personality, and she came from a wealthy family with 3 brothers and 1 sister. Her father often indulged her every wish. At midnight, Emily's father was informed about the accident involving her. He rushed to the hospital, where he found her in critical condition and on life support. The fire had severely burned her. The medical staff had to cut away her clothing in pieces, and the doctors could not predict her chances of survival. In conversation with the police, Johan quickly described the incident. He explained that they was on her way to a party in a nearby town that evening. He seeing a dark figure that looked like a wild boar suddenly run into the headlights, causing the accident. After their car crashed into a tree, he lost consciousness briefly and felt disoriented. When he regained awareness, he saw flames rising from the girl's head and spreading to her back. She was focused on escaping from the vehicle and did not notice him. When Johan ran out of the car to assist her, he found that she had already gotten outside. Meanwhile, the fire seemed to grow stronger. He grabbed a nearby bottle of water to try to extinguish the flames, but it was ineffective. Next, he tried using a fire extinguisher from the trunk, but it did not work. Johan took off his jacket and used it to smother the flames on Emily. In the end, he was able to put out the fire by covering her with his body to cut off the oxygen supply. Johann's explanation seemed credible, and the police found evidence at the accident site that looked like clumps of earth disturbed by an animal. It's likely that the headlights startled a wild boar, which attempted to cross the road and caused the accident. Nearby the burned vehicle, officers found a fire extinguisher with a broken nozzle, which accounted for its failure to work, supporting Johann's claims. However, it was still unclear why the fire started inside the vehicle. Although the accident was severe enough to ignite a fire, the fuel tank was unharmed, indicating that fuel couldn't have caused the fire, and the wiring appeared intact, making it unlikely that an electrical spark ignited it. There was a reason for what happened. Johann explained that earlier that day, he and his girlfriend had bought medical alcohol for cleaning and refueling equipment in the garage. He planned to clean the car's interior before selling it. He worked in a printing house where he regularly handled various chemicals. To avoid mistakes, he had developed a habit of checking the contents of chemical containers by opening them and smelling them. He believed that if the bottles had not been sealed properly, the liquids could have spilled during the accident and ignited. Before the crash, Johann noticed something glowing in his girlfriend's hands, which he thought might have been a lighter or a cell phone, but he wasn't sure. He believed that this glow could have ignited the spilled liquids. He considered the tragedy a result of unfortunate circumstances and insisted it was an accident. However, his girlfriend was still in intensive care, and the police felt it was unfair to attribute such serious damage solely to chance. As a result, detectives decided to investigate Johann further to see if he had any criminal history or tendencies toward violence. Suspecting there might have been some malicious intent in his actions, Johann was a 22-year-old worker at a printing house in Gonesse, France. He was known for being polite, conscientious, and always willing to help others. Friends and family regarded him as a model son and a dependable friend. At the time of the tragic events, he had been in a relationship with Emily for about 4 years. They had met when she was 16 and just starting her senior year of high school, while he was 2 years older. From the start, they had ambitious plans for their future, discussing the possibility of starting a family and having children. However, they were in no rush. Their plan was to first complete their education, secure good jobs, find a place to live, and only then consider starting a family. Their loved ones supported these goals, and despite their youth, they had a serious outlook on life. During college, they spent a lot of time together, often staying overnight at each other's homes. A few months before the accident, they got engaged, and Johann gave Emily a ring. They intended to move in together, and everything seemed to indicate that he was the perfect partner. The police decided to wait until dawn to investigate the scene more thoroughly. As the sun rose, the officers began to examine the area and question Johann's account of the accident. Although it was indeed an accident, they found no evidence of braking, suggesting that he may have crashed into the tree without slowing down. They suggested that the car had approached at a low speed and crashed into the tree on the passenger side, which likely explains why the driver did not incur serious injuries. The idea of wild boar tracks was deemed less credible. In daylight, the roadside was full of debris, and it was possible that the car's headlights had created confusion about the objects present. However, it appeared more like a staged incident. Experts who examined the car for flammable substances found that the fire did not start from underneath the vehicle. The lower area of the car near the driver's and passenger's feet did not sustain the damage expected in that situation. Johann claimed that alcohol or white spirit might have spilled, igniting the flames. Emily suffered the most severe burns on her head and back, suggesting that the fire started from above her seat rather than from below. In contrast, her legs were nearly untouched, which contradicted Johann's statements and raised concerns for the police. Forensic analysis of Emily's clothing revealed that it was nearly saturated with alcohol or a similar flammable liquid. This suggested that the fire did not originate from the cabin. Rather, it appeared that Emily had been doused with a flammable substance. This raised questions about how she could have been covered in medical alcohol or white spirit, while her boyfriend remained completely clean. Johann had no injuries at all, which deepened the mystery. It seems possible that an incident occurred that only affected Emily. If she had accidentally spilled a bottle of medical alcohol, Johann would likely have sustained burns or injuries from the fire. Instead, he escaped with only minor scratches from hitting a tree. Emily remained in critical condition, and the police believed that a deliberate crime was the most plausible explanation. Evidence suggested that the incident was staged. Emily had likely been intentionally doused with a medical alcohol and set on fire. The only remaining question was the motive behind it. However, these were merely assumptions that required further investigation. Emily's testimony was crucial, as she was the only witness who could answer all the police's questions. Unfortunately, she was in an induced coma, and the doctors had not provided a clear prognosis. After 5 weeks, she finally woke up, but her condition was weak, and her body was largely incapacitated, requiring a long recovery. Emily had sustained severe injuries that left her unable to move properly. Her left leg was unresponsive, and her arms had limited mobility. However, her cognitive functions were intact, allowing her to communicate fully with the detectives, who were eager to speak with her. During their first conversation, Emily spoke fondly of her boyfriend, describing their relationship as one of pure and sincere love. Johann had always been attentive and well-mannered. However, due to her time in the coma, Emily had significant gaps in her memory. She confirmed most of Johann's account of events, but she could not remember anything after he saw a shadow run onto the road. The doctors believed these memory gaps were a result of the coma and that Emily would need time to gradually recover her memories. Further discussions with the police were unproductive, and they would have to wait for her to regain more information. In the following weeks, while Emily was still hospitalized, Johann visited her several times a day. During each visit, he repeated his story, which started to sound increasingly suspicious. It seemed he was trying to manipulate her memories so she wouldn't recall what really happened. He pressured her to relay his version of events to the authorities, claiming it was essential to secure insurance payouts for the car. However, as Emily spent more time in the hospital, her memory began to improve. She started to notice inconsistencies in her boyfriend's account, especially rejecting the idea that an animal had been on the road. Emily mentioned that she had initially repeated Johann's story because he had convinced her it was true. However, she could not remember any wild boars on the road. Instead, she distinctly recalled the tree they crashed into before the fire started. At this time, her memory was still not fully restored. The detectives decided to interview Johann again to investigate his potential lies about the animals. He continued to stand by his original story, while Emily grew increasingly uneasy with his presence. She lost all trust in him and began to side with the police regarding his possible involvement in the accident. In June 2008, Johann chose to end his engagement with his fiancée, who was still in the hospital and unable to care for herself. In late June 2008, Emily had regained her memory and was able to provide the authorities with a new account of that tragic evening. In her statement, she portrayed Johann, whom she had once loved, as a cruel tyrant and manipulator. Emily revealed that throughout their relationship, she had endured both emotional and physical abuse from him. Johann had attempted to isolate her from her friends and family, controlling every aspect of her life. She felt trapped and was afraid to leave him, fearing he would retaliate. It was a vicious cycle that needed to be broken. Just before that evening, she and Johann were driving together when another argument broke out. The girl tried to express her feelings, which only fueled her boyfriend's anger. In that moment, she revealed that she wanted to end their relationship. Johann, filled with rage, began to speed up the car. The speedometer climbed past 130 kilometers per hour, and Emily became frightened, begging him to slow down. She remembered this moment with terror, realizing she was genuinely worried for her safety. Although Emily eventually calmed Johann down and he reduced his speed, she was left with a lingering fear that if she attempted to break up with him, he might react violently. Emily felt that their once beautiful love story had turned into a nightmare of manipulation. Unsure of what to do for a long time, she eventually met another young man. They had secret meetings, and she began to gather her thoughts to prepare for a calm breakup with Johann. Emily recalled that on the evening of the tragedy, she needed to attend a reunion with her high school friends in Goussainville. Although she wanted to go to the party alone, Johann insisted on accompanying her. As they drove toward the city, Johann missed the first exit from the highway and then the second. Emily realized he wasn't taking her to the friends' meeting. He might have suspected her of meeting someone else. Instead, he was heading to his hometown. Emily didn't want to go with him and began to protest. This was the same road where Johann had scared her by speeding just before these events. Now, he was doing it again. Emily saw the tree he was heading toward at high speed, and he didn't even try to brake. She understood that a collision was unavoidable, and it indeed occurred. Fortunately, both of them survived the car accident. Emily attempted to escape from him but struggled to open the passenger door. When she finally managed to get it open, she was unexpectedly engulfed in flames. Confused and in excruciating pain, she tried to extinguish the fire but collapsed to the ground. Suddenly, she felt pressure on her face. Emily told the detective that she saw Johann trying to strangle her with his leather jacket, which contradicted his claim that he was attempting to put out the fire. This led to the suggestion that Johann was trying to kill his fiancée. Ultimately, Emily lost consciousness and woke up in a hospital bed several weeks later. After recalling these events, she filed a report for attempted murder. Although Emily's family portrayed Johann positively, her concerns about him began to surface. Detectives interviewed Eloise, a co-worker of Emily's at the cash register. Eloise recalled that Johann exhibited erratic behavior. He called Emily daily, sometimes multiple times an hour, and frequently stalked her. He would become very upset if she didn't answer right away. Since Emily was busy at work, she couldn't always talk on the phone, but Johann disregarded this. His jealousy was intense. If Emily missed his calls, he would often show up at the supermarket and cause a scene, suspecting her of infidelity. Eloise confirmed that Emily had expressed her unhappiness about Johann's behavior several months before the car accident, leading her to consider breaking up with him. To gather more evidence, the police checked Johann's mobile phone and found that it had been at the Goussainville station one day before the incident. Emily traveled to this station daily for classes at a nearby school, close to where her new boyfriend lived. They often met during her commutes to and from college. It was revealed that Johann had witnessed another encounter between Emily and her new boyfriend, during which she had kissed him. This incident likely fueled Johann's jealousy and manipulation, which may have contributed to his decision to confront Emily. At this time, investigators found a motive that prompted Johann to take action. The key questions were how the fire started. It seems Johann did not plan to kill himself along with Emily. Instead, he intended to make it look like an accident, with the fire aimed at harming her. When he realized that Emily had not suffered serious injuries from the crash and that her burns were not life-threatening, he opted to strangle her with his leather jacket. Emily lost consciousness, and Johann mistakenly believed he had succeeded, so he called emergency services. However, he did not anticipate that Emily would survive and regain consciousness. Despite this, the investigators still lacked sufficient evidence to file charges, leading the police to conduct a more thorough investigation. During this time, the burned car was at the junkyard, where an expert in flammable materials and fire safety was summoned. After a brief search, they found a plastic bottle with alcohol residue under the driver's seat. The expert indicated that this was evidence of the fuel that Johann used to set Emily on fire. At the time, Emily was desperately trying to escape through the door and did not notice what Johann was doing. He took advantage of her distraction and confusion. After pouring the alcohol on Emily's dress, he casually placed the bottle by his feet near the driver's seat. Authorities found this sequence of events much more believable than Johann's account. They now had the murder weapon, a regular plastic bottle containing a highly flammable substance. On January 7, 2009, Johann was arrested and taken into custody. Despite the detectives' repeated efforts to get him to confess, he stuck to his story. He asserted that he had no mental health issues or addictions, nor did he have tendencies toward end his life or cruelty. Claims that were corroborated by several witnesses who knew him and Emily. Johann acknowledged that he felt jealous but denied the accusations that he had tormented Emily for months. He believed she was trying to take revenge for their breakup. Johann confirmed that he had been at the Goussainville station, but stated that he did not see Emily meeting or kissing other guys. He was there not to stalk her but to give her a ride to school when he could. Johann maintained that if he had seen her kissing someone else, he would have confronted her immediately, making a breakup unavoidable. He remained loyal to Emily until the very end, and was committed to the dream of having a complete family with her. The reason Johann passed the turn several times and ended up on a remote stretch of road away from Goussainville was a common habit. He liked to take detours when going into town. There were also concerns about an alcohol bottle found at his feet. Johann argued that this bottle did not indicate he had used substances for arson. He suggested that it could have rolled around the cabin during the incident and that its placement under the seat was purely coincidental. Despite the plausibility of his words, the detectives were frustrated by these coincidences, especially since they nearly resulted in Emily's death. In the end, Johann was incarcerated. It appeared that the investigation was wrapping up and the focus was now on determining his punishment and persuading the jury of the charges against him. However, in June 2009, a previously overlooked detail came to light that raised doubts about the prosecution's case. Johann's attorney demonstrated that the alcohol in the bottle found under the driver's seat did not match the size of the chemicals Johann had purchased on the day of the accident. From the start, the defense attorney believed the bottle was not a legitimate murder weapon and argued that the gendarmes had made a significant error. They overlooked the fact that the bottle could not have survived the fire that nearly took Emily's life. Since it originally held a flammable substance, it should have burned or melted, yet miraculously, it remained almost intact. The lawyer argued that the bottle only appeared in the car after it was taken to the dump, implying that someone had placed it there. The defense lodged a complaint in court, accusing the police of fabricating evidence against Johann. In response, the prosecution explained the bottle's condition by noting that the area around the feet of the driver and passenger sustained minimal damage. Finally, the judge reviewed the motion, found it valid, and subsequently released the accused from custody. Even after this victory, the lawyer continued his pursuit of justice. He took further steps to establish his client's innocence, firmly believing that the events of November 9, 2007 were purely accidental. To support his case, an independent accident expert was to reconstruct the incident. It was essential to clarify how the fire began and why only Emily was affected. According to the expert, the bottle of technical alcohol was indeed in the rear seat, as Johann had stated, and the victim must have had the container propelled forward due to the impact speed with the dashboard. The bottle likely ricocheted, and if the cap was not securely fastened, the alcohol would have splattered on the driver or passenger. Emily was simply unfortunate. The bottle moved toward her, dousing her in alcohol, and in her confusion, she did not realize what had happened before catching fire. The reconstructed path of the bottle matched exactly with the most severely burned areas on the girl's body, particularly her back and the back of her head, aligning with the expert's findings. Additionally, that part of the road was poorly lit, which meant that in the dark, the driver might have confused any random object on the roadside for an animal due to the headlights. There were several large objects scattered around, making the theory of an accident seem plausible. Moreover, since the passenger was positioned at a different angle, she might not have noticed the fleeting shadow that Johann thought was a wild boar. The only element that didn't fit this scenario was the source of the fire that ignited the alcohol. However, the independent expert had a reasonable explanation for this. He suggested that the spark could have been caused by a combination of factors. For example, static electricity might have built up on one of Emily's belongings, like her mobile phone, and discharged when she opened the vehicle door. By mid-January 2017, 10 years had passed, and the legal disputes were still ongoing. The prosecution's evidence was not strong enough to prove that Johann's actions were intentional. Meanwhile, the explanations involving multiple coincidences also lacked credibility, leaving the case unresolved. A standoff developed between the prosecution and the defense. June 2019, Emily testified in court about how Johann had tried to kill her, and she miraculously survived. Now she could finally share the whole truth. 12 years after the tragedy, the jurors sentenced Johann to 20 years in prison, concluding that Emily was a victim of his deliberate attempt to murder her. Johann continues to claim his innocence, and the disputes persist. What really happened? Was it an accident or an attempted crime? Regardless, all the characters in this tragedy continue to live. Emily underwent several skin grafts and was able to recover from her injuries. She completed her education and found a good job. The scars from the burns she suffered in the car accident will remain with her forever, as will her belief that Johann intended to take her life. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Lauren Hugelmayer. Lauren Hugelmayer was born on June 9, 1988, in Los Angeles County, California. She was one of 3 daughters of Dale and Lori. Lauren grew up in a close-knit religious family that regularly attended their local church and was well loved in the community. She developed a reputation for being exceptionally kind, caring, known for her bright smile and vibrant personality. Lauren had a close bond with her older sister Beth, but she was even closer to her father, with whom she shared a trusting relationship. While in high school, Lauren met a classmate named Matthew Phelps, who would later play an important role in her life. At that time, it was unclear whether they were just acquaintances or had a closer relationship. After Lauren's family moved to North Carolina, Matthew transferred to another school, which interrupted their connection. After graduating from high school, Lauren chose to attend Appalachian State University, where she earned a degree in business administration and management in 2011. In 2014, Lauren received a direct message on Instagram from Matthew. While Lauren had a stable life, Matthew lived in Kent and faced significant challenges. His father was completely absent, and his mother had remarried several times. Matthew struggled to connect with any of his stepfathers. This lack of parental attention contributed to behavioral problems in his life. During high school, Matthew fell in with a bad crowd, began abusing alcohol and banned substance, particularly cough syrup, which is often misused for its psychoactive effects. His substance abuse became increasingly obvious, and his grades suffered as a result. In response, his grandparents decided to transfer him from public high school to a private Christian academy, hoping this change would help him turn his life around. Eventually, this decision paid off. Matthew improved his academic performance and distanced himself from negative influences. After graduating, he chose to enroll in a Baptist university with the goal of becoming a pastor. Although he later abandoned this ambition. Let's return to his online reunion with Lauren. Matthew and Lauren started talking to learn more about each other. They quickly discovered they had many shared interests, including being big fans of Star Wars and Harry Potter. They also connected through their strong Christian faith and then their desire to build a family together. As their conversations continued, they transitioned from chatting online to nearly daily phone calls. A few months later, they decided to enter a long-distance relationship. Their bond grew stronger, and Matthew made an effort to visit Lauren whenever possible. Eventually, he chose to move to North Carolina to be closer to her to deepen their relationship. Lauren was thrilled by this decision because she had always dreamed of finding someone with whom she could create a strong family. Most of Lauren's family welcomed Matthew, particularly her mother, who treated him like another son and tried to introduce him to the family. However, things were not as easy with Lauren's father, Dale. He seemed reluctant to accept Matthew as part of the family and often avoided him, though the reasons for this were unclear. It might have just been a feeling. Despite this, Lauren's family made efforts to help Matthew feel more comfortable, and they eventually invited him to a family dinner. That night, while playing games and talking, Matthew surprised everyone by confessing that he was married before he got into a relationship with Lauren, but his marriage had ended. He did not provide any reasons for his divorce, which raised concerns for Dale. Dale felt that Matthew's refusal to explain might indicate that he had done something wrong, making Dale worry about his daughter's future. However, Lauren and the rest of the family seemed unconcerned about this issue. It was puzzling because despite their strong traditional values, none of them questioned Matthew's honesty or character. Lauren and Matthew continued their relationship. In 2015, they decided to get engaged. On November 11, 2016, they finally got married and hosted a big celebration. The wedding was a success, and since they were both fans of Star Wars, they chose this theme for the celebration. However, there was one unpleasant incident. Matthew's mother wore white to the wedding, despite being told that it was inappropriate. This suggested that she did not approve of Lauren. Additionally, Lauren's family found Matthew's mother rude and unpleasant. Dale expressed his discontent with the wedding due to lingering doubts about his son-in-law. He tried to suppress these feelings to avoid ruining his daughter's special day. After the wedding, Lauren and Matthew appeared very happy, with Lauren frequently posting pictures of herself and Matthew on social media, suggesting they had a perfect relationship. However, behind the scenes, their situation was more complicated. Matthew's coldness and contradictions began to show, revealing his true character. Their different childhood experiences turned them into different individuals. They both had what could be said to be different views on life, so problems began to arise. Additionally, Matthew's mother's rude behavior toward Lauren worsened the situation. For reasons unknown, she excluded Lauren from the family and often made her feel unwelcome. At that time, Lauren was independent and responsible, she even juggling 3 jobs because of her love for children. She volunteered at a children's Sunday school, worked as an auditor for a pharmaceutical company, and sold scented candles, which she enjoyed. Lauren also formed strong friendships with her colleagues, who appreciated her kindness and empathy. Lauren's dreams and plans were tragically shattered in the early hours of September 1, 2017. At midnight, emergency services received a distressing call from a man who sounded confused and embarrassed. He reported, "I turned on the light and saw her lying dead on the floor, and I have blood on me. There's a bloody knife on the bed, and I think I did it. I can't believe it. I'm right next to her." This man was Lauren's husband, Matthew. Matthew claimed he couldn't remember anything. He explained that before going to bed, he had taken a lot of cough syrup, which he believed caused him to commit this terrible act. When the police arrived, they found that Lauren was still alive. They rushed her to the hospital. However, despite their efforts, she sadly succumbed to her injuries and blood loss before reaching the hospital. When investigators examined the scene, they noticed it appeared too orderly, almost as if it had been staged. The knife was neatly placed on the bed, and the syrup was prominently displayed on the table, matching the details provided in the emergency call. However, they were surprised to find very little blood on Matthew, only a few drops on his shirt and shoes. This led them to suspect that an attempt had been made to clean up the scene before the emergency was reported, indicating that something more complicated was happening. Police believe it was not an accident. Additionally, the police noted Matthew's unusual behavior. He appeared calm despite expressing sadness over his wife's death. This made Matthew the prime suspect in the case, and he was eventually arrested. Authorities confiscated mobile phones, computers, documents, and journals containing Matthew's notes for investigation. A blood sample was also taken for toxicology tests. Investigators faced the difficult task of informing Lauren's family about these developments, leaving them devastated. An autopsy revealed that Lauren had suffered 123 stab and cut wounds. This raised the question, could an over-the-counter cough syrup turn a loving husband into a murderer? The syrup contains two active ingredients. Some believe that taking it in high doses can lead to euphoria, agitation, psychosis, and destructive behavior. To address these concerns, the product's manufacturer issued a statement expressing condolences to Lauren's family while also confirming that there was no evidence linking the syrup to violent behavior. Additionally, toxicology tests on Matthew showed that, although the syrup was detected in his blood, the dosage was not high enough to impact his mental state. Therefore, his claim that he was intoxicated by syrup when he attacked his wife was dismissed. The investigators aimed to understand what led Matthew to commit this act, so they conducted a detailed investigation, gathering information from family and friends. They discovered that Lauren and Matthew's relationship was not as ideal as it appeared in photos. Shortly after their wedding, they began experiencing various issues. Lauren was very independent and hardworking. In contrast, Matthew had a different attitude toward work. He was not motivated to work and often struggled to find or keep a job. Whenever he started a new job, he would quickly quit without explanation. Additionally, Matthew had a problem with overspending, particularly on unnecessary items like game consoles, video games, and online gaming subscriptions. Lauren and Matthew had a savings account for a trip to Disney. However, Matthew spent all the money without Lauren's consent or knowledge, even taking money from her purse, which amounted to stealing. This behavior caused frequent arguments between them. His excessive spending led to financial problems, which the Hugelmayer family recognized. Their relationship became increasingly strained, so Lauren expressed to family and friends that she might leave if things didn't improve. When asked why she hadn't taken that step, she cited her religious belief that everyone can be redeemed if they have faith. This belief motivated her to give her marriage a chance, but in reality, she found it difficult to tolerate her husband's behavior. Friends of Lauren reported that Matthew was controlling and jealous. He wrongly accused Lauren of having an affair with a church friend, despite there being no evidence to back this claim. Matthew had an irrational fear that Lauren would leave him, which stemmed from his previous marriage. He revealed to her that he divorced his first wife because she had been unfaithful, cheating on him with a church staff member. This experience left him in constant fear of abandonment. However, Matthew's behavior was inconsistent. He became very close to a neighbor and spent a lot of time with her. Even though he denied any romantic involvement, Lauren was convinced he was cheating on her with this neighbor. Despite her accusations, Matthew continued to see the woman. During police questioning, the neighbor claimed that their relationship was purely platonic. She explained that they connected because both were dealing with depression and anxiety. However, she noticed that Matthew had begun to discuss painful subjects, mostly related to death, prompting her to limit their interactions. At one point, Matthew claimed he had decided to return to college to pursue his dream of becoming a pastor, in an effort to win back Lauren's trust and save their relationship. Lauren reacted positively to this news. However, as time went on, their situation did not improve. Lauren's relatives observed that she had been in a very bad state and was no longer as happy as she used to be. They felt guilty for not intervening sooner. Lauren's older sister, Beth, made a significant statement. She recounted a phone call with Lauren the night before, during which Lauren was cooking dinner. During that call, the neighbor knocked on the door looking for Matthew. Without hesitation, Matthew left with the neighbor, leaving Lauren's dinner untouched. Beth expressed her frustration, saying she could no longer accept the situation and was convinced Matthew was cheating on Lauren, leading Lauren to decide to leave him. As the police gathered more evidence, the motive behind Lauren's death became clearer. The authorities conducted a detailed investigation of the apartment and confirmed their initial suspicions. Matthew had cleaned up before calling emergency services. Detectives also found what appeared to be an intimate diary of Matthew. This diary contained notes about his arguments with Lauren, his struggles with low self-esteem, and his feelings of insecurity in their marriage, especially since he knew her family had never accepted him. When experts examined Matthew's mobile phone, they discovered troubling search queries in his history. These included questions about the dangers of cough syrup and its effects on consciousness. This strongly suggested two things: first, that the attack was premeditated, and second, that Matthew was trying to mislead the authorities into thinking he was unaware of killing his wife while under the influence of the syrup. An important detail uncovered through Matthew's mobile phone revealed that just hours before he killed his wife, they had a heated argument through text messages and calls. Matthew claimed that Lauren accused him of cheating and expressed her desire to end their marriage, sufficient reason for a troubled mind to decide to kill his wife. Additionally, police discovered a secret Instagram account belonging to Matthew Under. The profile picture featured a character from the movie American Psycho, which is about a serial killer. His posts were filled with screenshots from the movie, and he even shared photos of himself dressed as one of its characters. Moreover, his posts contained themes that were completely contrary to Christian values, despite his self-identification as a believer. The last post was made just days before Lauren's murder and included disturbing photos of himself with a caption that read, "Everyone thinks I'm a serial killer," along with the hashtag "I found an angel that needs to be killed." Matthew's friend shared that he once expressed a fascination with killing, suggesting that taking a life would be a true joy. This troubling revelation paints a stark picture of Matthew, especially in light of statements made by his first wife concerning their separation. She revealed that their relationship, initially filled with common interests, deteriorated after marriage. Matthew began to overspend and failed to contribute financially. More alarmingly, he became abusive, often pulling her out of bed, throwing her to the floor, and assaulting her during his rages. This behavior left she terrified, leading her to seek a divorce. Her experience closely mirrors that of Lauren. During the trial, the defense argued that Matthew was not in his right mind during the crime and was likely suffering from instability and depression, worsened by substance use. They presented letters from Matthew's friends and colleagues to the court, claiming that his actions were out of character and that he was not a violent person. The trial occurred in October 2018. Although Matthew initially pleaded not guilty, he later accepted a plea agreement. On October 5, the judge found him guilty of first-degree involuntary manslaughter and sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lauren's family is still deeply affected by her absence and feels guilty for not stopping her relationship. To honor her memory, they created a foundation focused on raising awareness about abusive relationships and domestic violence. Matthew Phelps was a manipulative person who only cared about his own needs, disguising himself as someone harmless. Sadly, Lauren's compassion blinded her to his true nature, and it may have only been in her final moments that she understood his true character. Unfortunately, there are many individuals like him who can deceive others with ease. Some cases begin not with death, but with disappearance. The case of Mayhan Cordy is one example. On the night of August 18, 2018, after a wedding, 27-year-old Mayhan Cordy vanished on her way home in rural Oregon. She disappeared in a matter of minutes. No cries for help were heard. There were no witnesses, and no cameras captured the event. The only thing known is that an argument took place in the car. Mayhan's 3-year-old daughter, seated in her car seat, witnessed the argument. The next morning, Mayhan was reported missing. From there, the question arises not only what happened to Mayhan, but also who is lying, and what really happened in the final moments before she disappeared. The record begins on August 18, 2018, after a wedding and reception in the Grand Island area of Yamhill County, Oregon, when 27-year-old Mayhan Cordy is last known to be riding home in an SUV driven by her mother, Jennifer Weathers. The district attorney would later say Mayhan was seated in the back next to her 3-year-old daughter, strapped into a child safety seat. It is a simple fact, and it lands with weight. The child is there, watching the adults fracture in a closed space, with the road sliding past the windows. The atmosphere in those early accounts is tight and overheated, an argument that, according to the district attorney, turned heated as they left and continued inside the vehicle. In the cold hours that follow, the case does not announce itself as a death. It arrives first as absence. Mayhan is reported missing the next day, not that night. According to the district attorney's summary of the timeline, that delay becomes the first shadow on the file, not proof of anything, but a gap where certainty should be. If Mayhan truly left the vehicle on that dark rural route, what happened in the minutes between the argument and the moment her seat became empty? The search will start with one story, and then the ground will refuse to match it. The next morning brings the call, not in the dark hours when panic usually surfaces, but in daylight, when stories have time to settle. According to the investigation file and statements later summarized by the Yamhill County District Attorney, Mayhan Cordy is reported missing on August 19, 2018, nearly a full day after she was last seen. The official account given at that moment is direct. Mayhan allegedly exited the vehicle during an argument and walked away along a rural road, barefoot, without her phone, leaving her young daughter behind. It is a fact that shapes everything that follows. The report frames Mayhan as mobile, conscious, and alive when last seen. It gives investigators a starting assumption rather than a blank page. Deputies begin where the story points them along the roadway near Grand Island, scanning ditches, fields, and shoulders, working under the premise that a woman chose to leave. But the atmosphere around that assumption is uneasy. Friends and family describe Mayhan as devoted to her child, someone who did not disappear casually, not without shoes, not without contact. The delay in reporting her missing presses quietly against the timeline, not as an accusation. As pressure, searchers move through the area with methodical calm. There is no confirmed crime scene yet, no blood, no wreckage, just the logic of a narrative that may or may not be true. Investigators document the route, measure distances, and test the feasibility of a barefoot walk in the dark along a narrow road bordered by steep drops. The question sharpens as the hours pass. If Mayhan walked away, where did she go and why has no one seen her? The case, still officially a missing person investigation, now rests on whether the first story can survive contact with the terrain. By the second day, the search formalizes. According to the investigation file, deputies and volunteers built grids along the rural stretch near Grand Island Road, focusing on shoulders, embankments, and the dark spaces where a person might rest, hide, or fall. The guiding assumption remains intact. Mayhan Cordy allegedly left the vehicle on foot. The search is not yet forensic. It is logistical. That assumption carries weight. It narrows the radius. It dictates where eyes look and where they do not. Searchers move past guardrails, scan blackberry thickets, and peer down slopes that drop sharply from the asphalt. The road itself becomes a character unlit, narrow, unforgiving. In daylight, it appears manageable. At night, it would have been something else entirely. The atmosphere grows tense but controlled. There is no sign of struggle, no discarded clothing, no phone, nothing that contradicts the original account outright. Yet, nothing confirms it either. Each hour without a trace stretches the plausibility of a barefoot walk. Investigators quietly note distances. They test timelines. They consider how far someone could realistically travel in darkness without light or footwear. Family members wait nearby, suspended between hope and dread. The absence begins to feel heavier than evidence. According to public statements later summarized by the district attorney, law enforcement continues to operate without probable cause for a crime. There is no suspect, no accusation, just a missing woman and a story that still technically works. Then the search shifts not because of a tip, but because of gravity. On the third day, the focus moves closer to a guardrail overlooking a steep ravine. It is a routine expansion of the grid. Nothing more, nothing less. If Mahon did not walk away, what if she never left the road at all? The answer will come from below, not ahead. On August 21, 2018, the search ended where it had almost begun. Below a guardrail along the same rural road, searchers locate Mayan Cordy's body in a ravine. The distance is not far. According to the investigation file, she was found roughly 40 feet down the embankment, obscured by brush and shadow, invisible from the road above. The fact is immediate and irreversible. Mahon did not walk away into the night. She fell. The atmosphere changes in an instant. What had been a missing person case becomes a death investigation. Deputies secure the area. The slope is measured. The guardrail is examined. Investigators document the scene carefully, noting the lack of skid marks, the absence of debris suggesting a vehicle strike, and no clear signs of a struggle at the top of the embankment. According to the district attorney's later public summary, an autopsy will later determine that Mahon died from blunt force trauma consistent with a fall. There are no fractures indicating defensive wounds. Toxicology shows alcohol in her system, but not at levels that alone explain what happened. The medical findings do not point to homicide. They leave space, dangerous space for interpretation. The feeling among those closest to the case is not relief. It is disorientation. The body's location challenges the original story without fully destroying it. If Mahon exited the vehicle, how did she end up beyond the guardrail? If she fell accidentally, what placed her there in the first place? Investigators now face a narrowing corridor of time and motion. Minutes matter. Distances matter. The truth, whatever it is, exists between the SUV stopping and the body coming to rest below. Was this an accident born of chaos, or the final result of something that happened on the road above? The investigation turns upward, back to the vehicle, back to the ride, back to the argument. The investigation tightens around the ride itself. Not the wedding, not the search, the minutes inside the SUV. According to the district attorney's public findings, investigators reconstruct the route using timelines, statements, and physical constraints. The drive from the reception is short. The window for anything to happen is measured in minutes, not miles. It is confirmed that an argument took place inside the vehicle. That fact is not disputed. What remains disputed is its final shape. According to the investigation file, Jennifer Weathers states that Mahon became upset, exited the vehicle voluntarily, and walked away with the road dark ahead of her. The child remains in her car seat. The vehicle eventually leaves the area. There is no independent witness to the moment Mahon leaves the SUV. No camera footage captures the stop. No phone data fills the gap. Her phone is not with her. Investigators test whether the SUV could have struck her. The vehicle shows no damage consistent with a collision. No paint transfer. No biological evidence. The road surface offers no marks suggesting impact. The atmosphere turns cold and procedural. This is where emotion gives way to thresholds. Prosecutors do not ask what feels likely. They ask what can be proven. The fall trajectory is analyzed. The guardrail height is measured. Investigators consider whether a person could accidentally go over it in darkness, impaired, or emotionally charged. According to the district attorney, there is no evidence that Mahon was pushed. There is also no evidence she was restrained, dragged, or assaulted at the roadside. The absence becomes decisive, not because it answers the question, but because it limits what the law can say. Still, one fact refuses to settle. Mahon's final location is perilously close to where the SUV allegedly stopped. If this were an accident, it happened fast. If it was something else, it left almost nothing behind. So what does justice look like when proof runs out before doubt does? The case now moves from investigation to decision. The district attorney stands before the public with a conclusion that lands quietly, almost defensively. According to the official findings released by Yamhill County prosecutors, there is insufficient evidence to charge anyone with Mahon Cordy's death. The words are careful. They do not declare innocence. They declare a boundary. The central fact is procedural, and final no homicide charge will be filed. The investigation, according to the district attorney, uncovered no forensic proof that Mahon was pushed, struck, or intentionally harmed. The autopsy supports a fatal fall. The scene offers no marks of violence. The vehicle offers no contradiction. In criminal court, absence is not neutral. It favors the accused. The atmosphere surrounding the announcement is heavy and unresolved. For Mahon's family, the explanation answers mechanics but not meaning. A mother is gone. A child remains. And the law, constrained by standards of proof, steps back. Prosecutors acknowledge publicly that the circumstances are troubling. They also acknowledge that troubling is not a chargeable offense. There is, however, one path the evidence does allow. Toxicology results and witness statements confirm that the driver of the SUV had been drinking that night. According to court records, Jennifer Weathers is charged not in connection with Mahon's death, but with driving under the influence of intoxicants and reckless endangerment related to operating a vehicle with a child inside. The separation is stark. One legal process for a death, another for conduct. This is where justice fractures into categories. Moral responsibility and criminal liability move on separate tracks. The case does not collapse. It narrows. And as it narrows, the courtroom becomes the only place left where answers might echo even if they fall short. What does accountability mean when the worst outcome carries no corresponding charge? The story now shifts from investigation to adjudication. The courtroom is smaller than the questions that fill it. According to court records, Jennifer Weathers ultimately pleaded guilty to driving under the influence of intoxicants. The charge is narrow by design. It addresses behavior, not outcome. It does not speak Mahon Cordy's name. Even though her absence is the reason the room is full, the fact is procedural, and restrained. The plea acknowledges impaired driving on the night of August 18, 2018. It does not establish causation for the fall. It does not assign criminal responsibility for a death. The judge sentences within that framework, bound to what the law allows, not what the moment suggests. The atmosphere is subdued, almost hollow. There is no dramatic testimony, no final reveal. The case does not resolve itself with a confession or a verdict that answers everything. Instead, it leaves echoes, statements read into the record, arguments carefully worded, grief contained by courtroom etiquette. For Mahon's family, the proceedings offer structure but not closure. The law has spoken, but only in part. Outside the courtroom, the questions remain unchanged. Why was Mahan left on a dark road? Why did help not come sooner? Why did the night end the way it did? The case becomes an example of a larger truth within the justice system. The criminal court is not designed to solve every mystery. It is designed to rule on provable acts. Everything else, the emotional truth, the moral weight, falls to those left behind. Mahan's daughter grows up without her mother. That is not a sentence the court can issue, but it is the one that endures. When the gavel falls, the record closes, but the story does not. What remains after the law finishes speaking? The answer lies beyond the courtroom. In consequence and memory, after the case closes, silence takes over. Not the quiet of resolution, but the kind that settles when institutions step back, and families are left to carry what remains. The official finding stands: Mahan Kordi's death is ruled an accident. According to public records and the district attorney's final statements, there is no criminal responsibility assigned for the fall itself. The law moves on. The fact is unchangeable. Mahan is gone. She was 27, a mother, a daughter, a presence that once filled rooms and now exists only in photographs, testimony, and memory. Her child grows older with an absence that cannot be cross-examined or appealed. The atmosphere surrounding the case lingers in unease. In Yamhill County, the road remains where it was: quiet, rural, unremarkable. Guardrails do not carry warnings about grief. They are not built to hold answers. The case becomes one of those stories passed between people carefully, with pauses, with lowered voices. Not because it is unsolved, but because it feels unfinished. There is a social lesson embedded in the outcome, whether acknowledged or not. Alcohol, family conflict, and delayed action can combine into irreversible consequences without ever crossing the legal threshold of a crime. The justice system can explain how something happened without explaining why it should never have happened at all. Mahan Kordi's name now exists in public records and news archives, but her true legacy is quieter. It is the reminder that some nights change everything, and some truths arrive only after it is too late to act on them. The file is closed. The questions remain. And sometimes, that is the most haunting ending of all. Hello everyone. Today we will learn about another case. The case of Mary Catherine Edwards. Before the advent of modern DNA research techniques, building a criminal database was challenging, making the investigation and tracing of crimes less effective. However, recent technological advances have led to the development of sophisticated tools that can help identify criminals who have been on the run for years. Now, no one can evade justice. On January 14, 1995, the Edwards family had a planned gathering. Saturday dinners together were a cherished tradition for the parents and their two daughters. So, when one of the twin sisters, Mary, was missing, it raised immediate concerns. Mary Catherine, 31, did not attend the dinner and did not answer calls from her family members, who were trying to reach her from the restaurant. Frustrated, they decided to go to Mary's home in Beaumont, Texas, where she was living at the time. When Mary's mother arrived at the house, she became worried upon finding the door unlocked. Inside, they heard running water but received no response to their calls. The bathroom was flooded, and Mary was discovered unresponsive in distressing conditions. Her sister Allison immediately called the police to report that she had found Mary's lifeless body. The sisters were twins, raised in Texas, and were the only children in the Edwards family. The loss of one was a devastating shock. They had always been inseparable, kind-hearted, and dedicated to helping others, especially children. After graduating high school, both sisters pursued careers as teachers and worked at the same school. They were so similar that students and faculty often confused them. At the time of her death, Mary was 31 years old and thriving in her career. Known for her bright personality, her murder sparked widespread outrage and anger. Mary was cherished by her students, many of whom felt a close bond with her. Hundreds of children, relatives, and friends attended her funeral, with many students mourning the loss of a woman who had been a vital source of support in their challenging lives. Some were in tears upon hearing the news of her passing. Parents urged detectives to take action against the criminal responsible for the brutal death of Mary. The community was horrified by the circumstances surrounding her death. Mary was found handcuffed in the bathroom, indicating that she had been abused. The bathtub was filled with blood, showing that she had fought back against her attacker, as evidenced by defensive wounds on her hands and body. Traces of the assault suggested that it occurred in her bedroom, where evidence was found on the bedding. Investigators suspected that Mary might have known her attacker, as there were no signs of forced entry into her home. The townspeople, who knew Mary well, cooperated with detectives, eager to identify the person responsible for such a horrific crime. Given the brutality and circumstances, detectives focused their investigation on her close acquaintances, believing there could be a personal motive. It was initially thought that Mary might have drowned, but an autopsy revealed that her lungs did not contain enough water, suggesting that water only entered her lungs after she had died. The true cause of death was asphyxiation, as indicated by distinct marks on her neck, and injuries suggesting she had been tightly restrained with great force until she could no longer resist. Forensic experts meticulously reconstructed the crime scene by examining the victim's house, starting with the bathroom and then moving to the bedroom. They collected a significant amount of evidence. The most alarming item found was the Smith & Wesson handcuffs that the victim had been restrained with, which resembled those used by police. This discovery left law enforcement officials confused, raising suspicions about whether someone connected to the police or a security worker might have had a personal relationship with the victim. The emotional impact of the case was deeply felt by everyone involved. In the weeks following the crime, detectives attempted to trace the serial number of the handcuffs, but their efforts were unsuccessful. By this time, the primary suspect had shifted to David Perry, the ex-boyfriend of Mary. Even though Mary was attractive and sociable, she maintained a small circle of close friends and had a few ex-lovers. She dedicated most of her time to her work and her students, leaving little room for a personal life. It was discovered that David Perry was the only person who might have had keys to her house. This raised concerns that he could have been stalking her and visiting her home out of jealousy or revenge. David agreed to cooperate with the police and provide everything needed for the examination. While waiting for the results, detectives interviewed mutual acquaintances of the couple, and everyone described David as a completely harmless person, showing no signs of aggression. He had no prior criminal record, history of violent or abuse offenses. Additionally, David Perry presented solid evidence of his alibi. He was not even in town on the night of the murder, as confirmed by multiple witnesses. David fully cooperated with the investigation, voluntarily provided DNA samples, and did not exhibit any characteristics of a criminal. Forensic analysis confirmed that the DNA did not match, leading to his removal from the list of suspects. Unfortunately, that was where the investigation stalled. Others in the victim's close circle also did not fit the criminal profile and had solid alibis. Although investigators had a lot of materials for analysis, the forensic technology at the time was insufficient to make further progress. The unsuccessful search continued for years. The situation changed significantly 23 years later, in 2018, with the introduction of a DNA analysis method that utilized genealogy. This method allowed investigators to find potential matches by examining relatives of the suspected. Law enforcement turned to the GEDmatch program, which collects DNA from Americans who voluntarily submit their samples, creating a large database. This database was instrumental in solving long-standing unsolved cases. When Detective Brandon Bess was advised to revisit the old cases, he immediately recalled the unsolved murder of Mary Edwards, which had troubled him for years. In April 2020, DNA samples from the scene related to Mary were sent to a lab at Othram for analysis. Here, many matches were found with the relatives of the killer. This marked the beginning of building a family tree related to the suspect. The number of names that needed analysis was overwhelming, totaling several thousand individuals. At this point, the detective's wife, who had a keen interest in genealogy, decided to assist with the investigation. She dedicated her free time to carefully examining matches from this extensive list. This task required precision, as each name needed to be evaluated accurately to ensure their efforts were worthwhile. Additionally, the investigators reviewed the diaries of Mary. It was believed that the victim may have had an obsessive admirer who harmed her out of unrequited love. Despite a thorough examination of the diary entries following the crime, no significant leads were uncovered. They then chose to cross-reference the names mentioned in the diaries with those in the genealogical records. During this process, the surname Lapointe began to come to light. The first identified relative of the murderer was Heiress Lapointe. When contacted, Heiress revealed that she is a well-known expert in genealogy and genetics. With decades of experience in her field, Heiress had previously worked on challenging cases. Notably, she successfully identified one of the women buried along a state highway in the infamous Texas Fields of Death. Now, she was eager to apply her expertise to help solve other crimes, including the mystery surrounding Mary Edwards's death. She was prepared to assist with the investigation, even though it meant examining her own family members, which could lead to unsettling discoveries. As she began her analysis, she felt a sense of dread while checking the backgrounds of her own siblings, aware that the results might have serious implications. She needed to review about 7,500 names. Each individual on this list was examined slowly, requiring her to gather and process information about them and their relatives before either adding them to the family tree or discarding them. This process took several hours for each person. Over 3 months, detectives and Heiress Lapointe devoted all their free time to searching for the criminal. Eventually, they found a promising lead, a couple living in Beaumont who matched the profile of the murderer's family. They have 2 sons who attended Forest Park High School, the same school Mary attended as a child. This led to 2 main suspects, Michael Foreman and Clayton Foreman. Michael did not match the age profile for the time of the crime. After checking, he was found to have no criminal record or history of aggressive behavior, so he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Clayton's situation was different. He had known Mary Edwards from high school and was closer in age to her. Furthermore, he had a criminal record for abuse, making him a strong suspect. In 1981, a 19-year-old girl reported to the police that Clayton Foreman had tied her hands and abused her. The details of that crime were strikingly similar to the incident involving Mary that occurred nearly 15 years later, with the key difference being that the first victim survived. She had also attended Forest Park High School, while Clayton was a manager at that time. The incident was effectively concealed, leading to Clayton receiving a suspended sentence and a fine. At that time, there were no police databases containing DNA samples, and he was not required to provide any. This lack of evidence is why Clayton was not identified during the investigation into the death of Diana Coe, his girlfriend of 3 years, with whom he had been planning to marry. Although Diana described him as a nice guy, it seems she did not truly know him. Less than 3 months before their wedding, she discovered the details of his abuse charge, the suspended sentence, and the fine, prompting her to want to end their engagement. However, Clayton, a manipulative liar, convinced her that it was all a misunderstanding. He avoided discussing the issue but created a believable narrative. Diana, eager to believe him, prioritized her relationship over her safety, which turned out to be a mistake. They went ahead with the marriage despite warnings from her family. When Diana and Clayton were married for just over 11 years, Diana claimed that Clayton frequently lied about his significant financial issues. She also observed that he had an unusual obsession with police handcuffs and law enforcement tools, even hanging a pair of handcuffs from the rearview mirror of his car. By the time Mary was killed, Diana had already divorced Clayton. She recalled calling him in tears to share the news, but she was taken aback by his indifferent response. He continued the conversation as if nothing had happened and then hung up. It became evident that he was likely not overly concerned about the situation. He was probably connected to the events that had transpired. The suspect was now 60 years old and no longer lived in Beaumont. He had been located in a small town called Reynoldsburg, Ohio, which had a population of a few thousand. At that time, Clayton was working as a driver. Investigators were able to find his address and all necessary information. Now they needed to collect his DNA for analysis. They set up surveillance on the suspect's house. A local police officer even took his trash, which was sent to a forensic lab. DNA from Clayton was discovered on a beer bottle found in the garbage. The match was nearly 100%. A significant finding indicated that the investigation was nearly complete after all these years. The next step was to confront the suspect. The detectives in charge of the case traveled to Ohio and devised a plan to lure Clayton into a trap. Since he was a driver, they decided to approach him about a fictitious lost item that a client was supposedly searching for. On April 29, 2021, Clayton was summoned to the police precinct under the pretense of discussing a lost wallet. He agreed to come in voluntarily. For the first time in 26 years since a brutal murder, the suspected perpetrator was in the interrogation room. The detectives informed him about the murder of Mary Edwards. This news shocked him, but Clayton attempted to maintain his composure and initially denied knowing her. The detectives then showed him a wedding photo of his first wife, which included Mary and her twin sister as bridesmaids. This reminded him that Mary had indeed attended his wedding, as his wife had invited her. From the beginning, Clayton became visibly nervous as the detectives bombarded him with questions, revealing inconsistencies in his story. The detectives focused on his vulnerabilities, hoping to obtain a confession. Clayton insisted that he was unaware of Mary's death and claimed he had never been to her house. However, these statements were quickly refuted by his ex-wife. Despite the evidence, Clayton continued to deny any connection to Mary, which seemed to be a defensive reaction. He also denied having had intimate relations with her, but this was proven false when DNA samples matching his were found on her body. The realization that his DNA was discovered on her underwear and body left him bewildered. When he was arrested for the murder of Mary Edwards, he insisted on having a lawyer and stopped cooperating with the investigators. In a symbolic gesture of victory in this long-standing case, Clayton Foreman was handcuffed with the same type of cuffs that had been found on Mary. On March 12, 2024, over 29 years after the murder of Mary, Beaumont prosecutor Patrick Knauth and colleagues Mike Laird, Sonny Eckhart are ready to go to trial. The absence of a lawyer limited his options. Weak attempts to invoke the statute of limitations were unsuccessful. Clayton Foreman remained obstinately silent, neither confessing to the murder nor defending himself in court. For everyone involved in the investigation, emotions ran high. Cheryl LaPointe worried that the Clayton's family would resent her for participating in Clayton's arrest. Nevertheless, she received support, with others expressing concern for her safety leading up to the court hearings. Shara felt it was her duty to uncover the truth behind the cold-blooded murder, regardless of the personal costs. One of the key witnesses for the prosecution was the twin sister of Mary, Allison, who emotionally recounted how Clayton took away the person she loved most. Even after many years, she still bore a striking resemblance to her sister. During the trial, the prosecution brought in experts in genealogy and genetics, along with forensic laboratory specialists, to explain advanced DNA analysis techniques to the jurors. It was crucial to demonstrate that relative matching methods were reliable. The prosecution also focused on women who had been impacted by Clayton's actions. One of his former colleagues testified, sharing her observations of Clayton's unusual interest in police items at work. As his subordinate who handled documents, she often opened his desk drawer and found a pair of handcuffs. Although she found this odd, she didn't feel comfortable asking him about it, thinking it was just one of his quirks. The defendant's last wife shared how she discovered many dress-revealingly photos of underage girls. When she confronted Clayton about them, he responded calmly, saying he needed them to fantasize about taking away their innocence. He then laughed, dismissing it as a failed joke. Despite these disturbing revelations, Clayton continued to evade justice. One of his victims, Diana Coe, also attended the trial. She believed in his guilt and testified for the prosecution. It was during this time that she learned about another victim and realized the full extent of her ex-husband's cruelty. However, she pointed out that during their 11 years of marriage, he did not display such behaviors during their intimate moments and never crossed reasonable boundaries in their relationship. The first victim of Clayton's assault provided a detailed testimony about her experience. At the time, she was 19 years old and just months away from his wedding to Diana. One night, while driving home along a dirt road, her car got stuck. Suddenly, a civilian car pulled up, and a man claiming to be a police officer got out to offer her help. Feeling helpless, she accepted his assistance. However, as she stepped out of her car, he attacked her, tied her hands behind her back, and threatened her with a knife, saying he would slit her throat if she resisted. Clayton abused her. Surprisingly, afterward, he became more gentle, even driving her home. During the ride, he asked her not to cry, tried to comfort her, and expressed remorse for what had happened, claiming he didn't want to hurt her. This sudden shift in his demeanor was unsettling, especially considering the violent behavior he had just exhibited. At that time, she reported the incident to the police, but she was fearful. In court, she mentioned that she had forgiven her attacker and harbored no resentment towards him. She did not wish to harm Clayton. She believed he truly regretted his actions and would not reoffend. This perspective contributed to the light punishment he received. Now the first victim feels guilty, thinking that if Clayton had been imprisoned, it might have prevented the murder of Mary. Additionally, another victim testified against the defendant in court. Previously, she had been too afraid to contact law enforcement. This woman was also a friend of Diana, with whom she had stayed in touch during school. According to her testimony, Clayton attacked her one evening in 2006 while she was living alone in her apartment. Their past friendship allowed her to communicate with him, and he initially appeared to be an ordinary guy until his darker side emerged. One evening, Clayton visited her apartment and revealed that he was struggling financially and having marital issues. He was convincing, expressing a need for someone to understand and listen to him without judgment. Feeling sympathetic, she let him in. However, once she turned her back, he attacked her, held a gun to her head, threatened her, and assaulted her. He also used handcuffs during the attack. After it was over, Clayton surprisingly softened, apologized, and asked her not to report the incident to the police. She was scared, so she did not file charges against him. Following that night, Clayton did not reach out to her at all. It's important to note that his assaults were strikingly similar to a situation that could have occurred with Mary Edwards. Unlike previous victims, however, Mary fought back against his attack. The prosecution's witnesses testified for 7 days, while the defense presented no evidence. The defense attorney claimed that although Clayton might be an abuser, there was no proof that he was also a murderer. The defense suggested that Clayton's limited options might have influenced the situation. They acknowledged incidents involving other women, stating that Clayton typically did not act aggressively towards his wives, except for his fetish involving handcuffs. After hearing the prosecution's arguments, the jurors went to deliberate. They found Clayton Foreman guilty of murdering Mary Catherine Edwards. He received a life sentence, Clayton is eligible for parole in 2061. By then, he will be 101 years old. The jurors stated that it was not merely the testimonies from the traumatized women that led to their decision. Rather, it was the forensic experts' analysis of DNA evidence showing a nearly 100% match with Clayton Foreman's DNA that confirmed their conviction. The experts provided such a thorough explanation of the principles of modern forensic methodologies that it was difficult to find more convincing words. The convict also refused to admit his guilt until the end, even in the face of evidence regarding the abuse. Naturally, against this background, he never revealed the details of his heinous crime. Nevertheless, there remained even more horrifying questions. For many years, Clayton managed to skillfully hide his malicious nature from everyone around him, even from the women he lived closely with. Most people around him had no idea that he was capable of murder. Authorities suspected that he might have been involved in a significantly larger number of bloody crimes that remained unsolved. Clayton Foreman is in state prison. He will be eligible for parole in 2061, of course, if he lives that long. He continues to keep silent, while authorities do not lose hope that he will eventually reveal his secrets. Hello everyone, today we will learn about another case. The case of Lindley Rennick. Ben Rennick was born on August 4, 1987, in St. Louis, Missouri, USA. He was the second and youngest child in his family. His older brother, Sam, considered Ben a precious gift from the moment he was born. From a young age, Ben developed a fascination with snakes. While attending Montgomery County High School, he immersed himself in learning about them and dreamed of starting a snake breeding business. Although this hobby was uncommon, he found it incredibly interesting. As a child, Ben met Lindley, a girl 4 years his senior. She was beautiful, with long, light hair and delicate features, but Ben was too young to pursue a relationship, so nothing happened between them. After graduating high school, Ben continued to focus on his passion for snakes, expanding his knowledge and gaining respect from other experts in the field. 2 years later, Ben's mother passed away from a serious illness. While this was a painful experience, he decided to move forward, possibly to ease the shock. He focused all his efforts on turning his hobby into a source of income, and eventually, his hard work paid off. By 2010, Ben Rennick had become a successful breeder and established a national business called Rennick Reptiles, which specialized in the selective breeding of designer pythons. The business quickly thrived, and soon, reptiles were being sold to customers worldwide, from the UK to Japan. Although Sam and Ben had separate homes, they continued to live on the family farm with their father, honoring their mother's wish not to abandon it after her passing. The 28-acre property provided ample space, allowing the brothers to maintain a close relationship. They often spent weekends fishing together and enjoyed a strong brotherhood. As the business grew, the facility became home to over 3,000 reptiles, some valued at $1,000 each. Ben enjoyed success and often traveled to conventions across the United States, earning a reputation as a prominent figure in the reptile community, even being referred to as the rock star of snakes. In interviews, he attributed his success to his careful attention to his pets and his commitment to his clients. In 2011, he felt particularly fortunate when he reconnected with Lindley, a girl he had had a crush on during his youth. Before reconnecting with Ben, Lindley had been in several relationships. She was initially involved with a man named Michael Humphrey, who was later imprisoned for banned substance possession. After another unsuccessful relationship, Lindley became a mother to a son. By the time she reached out to Ben again, she was single, and Ben had matured, making their communication smooth and comfortable. Ben confidently pursued Lindley, and their relationship quickly became serious. Ben quickly became overwhelmed by the success he achieved at a young age. He was a respected professional, admired by many. Ben was not only business-minded but also kind and mature for his age, which allowed him to take on a fatherly role for Linley's son, whom he embraced as his own. Eventually, Linley, her son, and Ben began living together. Tragedy struck the family in 2012 when Frank, the father of Ben and Sam, was involved in a stock scheme that caused significant financial losses for many people. Then, Ben discovered that his father had taken his own life. This devastating event forced the brothers to inherit the family property and confront their loss once again, now complicated by the shame surrounding the incident. Ben found comfort in his personal professional project and in a long-awaited moment with Linley. In 2014, she accepted his marriage proposal, and that year, they celebrated a wedding. Soon after, they welcomed a daughter named Emma. In his free time, Ben enjoyed playing the drums and watching horror films, but his main focus was on his family. He valued the time spent with his wife and children. To keep the romance alive, he organized weekly date nights with Linley, just as they had done when they were engaged. This was also his way of showing appreciation for Linley's hard work, as she dedicated herself to helping him manage their snakes, which involved cleaning and sorting. In 2016, they launched a second business, this time in the personal hygiene sector. They opened a spa in a shopping center in Columbia, Missouri, something Linley had always dreamed of, given her background as an experienced massage therapist. She invited her longtime friend, Ashley Shaw, to join the salon. Their success continued into 2017, when Ben made a $1 million deal selling some of his pythons and anacondas. The agreement included quarterly payments of $200,000, starting with the first payment in February. However, Linley's business was facing serious financial problems. In early 2017, she had credit debt, and two companies sued her for over $88,000 in unpaid bills for work done in previous years. Additionally, Linley was hiding more than just her financial troubles. She created a profile on a dating app and began an affair with a man named Brandon Blackwell, meeting him a few times each month. For reasons that could include her financial struggles, ambition, or feelings of betrayal, Linley started to contemplate how to rid herself of her husband, Ben, although she never openly expressed this desire. Linley confided in Ashley, who worked at the spa, claiming that she was a victim of violence and abuse from Ben. Taking advantage of this situation, she persuaded her friend to help her escape. Ashley agreed and provided Linley with banned substance. On one night in 2017, Linley secretly drugged Ben by spiking his protein shake with a nearly lethal dose of illegal substances. Miraculously, Ben survived the ordeal, although he became very ill and took a long time to recover. Throughout this process, he never suspected that his wife was involved. The bank that Linley was in debt to informed Ben of the situation. Aware of the crisis at the spa and his wife's deception, Ben spoke up and shared his feelings with her. This led to a tense atmosphere between them that lasted for several weeks. In mid-May 2017, Linley decided to contact her ex-boyfriend Michael, who had just been released from prison. She and Ashley visited him at his home. During their conversation, which seemed casual as they reminisced about their past relationship, Linley claimed to be a victim of an abusive husband. She even confessed to Michael about her failed attempt to use a protein drink to escape her situation. Linley expressed that she felt trapped and was determined to file for divorce, but she was also afraid of how Ben would react, fearing that his response could threaten her life and the lives of her children. While continuing her affair with Brandon, Linley made the mistake of sharing every detail of her plans to remove Ben from her life. On June 8, 2017, Linley and her ex-boyfriend Michael went to the farm, equipped with gloves, a gun, and a plan. Linley intended to introduce Michael as an old friend interested in Ben's business. However, when Michael saw Ben busy cleaning the breeding facilities, he felt uneasy. He asked Linley to go back to the car, where he handed her the gun and suggested that she take charge of the plan. Without hesitation or fear, Linley returned to the scene and, seeing that Ben was focused on his work, she attacked him multiple times. Michael picked up most of the shell casings he found, but he missed a few that were left behind. Afterward, he and Lindley went to the spa, where Lindley removed her clothes. Ashley was there, and Lindley asked her to help wash her body and arms thoroughly. During this time, Lindley explained to Ashley what had happened. Later, Lindley returned to the snake nursery and pretended to be surprised and upset. She called Sam to inform him about Ben's situation. Sam rushed to the scene. Upon arrival, thought Ben had been bitten by an anaconda because his skull looked crushed and there were 2 puncture wounds on his arm that resembled bite marks. Sam immediately called emergency services. Montgomery County Coroner Dave Colbert had described the scene as one of the strangest and most dangerous he had encountered in his 20-year career. Investigators searched the nursery, which housed 10-foot pythons and anacondas weighing over 90 kilograms. They were unsure where the anaconda might be hiding. As they carefully examined the area, Colbert made a shocking discovery: Ben's body, lying face down, concealed the actual cause of death. It wasn't an anaconda bite that killed him. He had been attacked with a weapon 8 times at close range. Investigators initially considered the possibility of a botched robbery but dismissed it since none of the snakes were missing. The evidence at the crime scene suggested that Ben was familiar with his killer. The agents decided to closely monitor those who were closest to Ben, ensuring that no potential suspects were overlooked. The day after the murder, detectives questioned Sam and then Lindley. A surprising moment occurred when Lindley tried to blame Sam for the crime, but this theory was never pursued. Sam, who had no gunpowder residue on his hands and fully cooperated with the investigation, was released. While the detectives continued their work, the community of reptile breeders came together to support Ben's wife and children by organizing an online auction for snakes. However, just 11 days after Ben's murder, Lindley, who everyone thought was grieving, made a shocking confession during another interrogation of her. She revealed that at the time of the murder, she had an alibi. She was with Brandon, her affair partner. Detectives investigated the alibis of Lindley and Brandon, confirming they were not involved. Next, they questioned Ashley. At the same time, they examined Lindley and Ben's Facebook accounts, discovered that the spa was facing financial difficulties, which had made Ben very angry. For months after the incident, Lindley returned to the police station and agreed to take a polygraph test. However, the test was unsuccessful when she was asked about her relationship with her ex-boyfriend Michael and the messages they had exchanged in the hours surrounding Ben's death. Lindley stated that Michael had visited the snake farm as a client. Lindley faced a lot of circumstantial evidence that seemed to implicate her, and investigators made this clear to her. However, her gunshot residue test came back negative. Without any witnesses, a murder weapon, or direct evidence tying her to the crime, the officers had no option but to let her go free from the interrogation room. A few weeks later, claiming financial difficulties, Lindley closed the spa and quickly left town. Before leaving, she put the family property up for sale. In February 2018, she applied for 2 types of property payments from the family allowance, totaling $15,000, along with monthly family benefits. That summer, she sold Ben's property to a married couple for over $740,000, unaware that the police were suspicious of her. Sam remained oblivious to her connection to his brother's murder. Months passed with no arrests made. Snake enthusiasts confused and reached out to each other for any information about the case. Sam and others in Ben's close circle wanted to support Lindley as much as they could. However, as time passed, they noticed something was wrong when she refused to talk to them, wouldn't let Sam see the children, and prevented him from taking Ben's belongings. A year and a half after Ben's murder, Lindley and Brandon had a child together, but Lindley soon claimed that Brandon had become aggressive, leading her to break up with him. She also secured a restraining order against him and accused him of violence. Brandon denied these claims but ended up in jail because of them. Meanwhile, speculation grew about the murder, with many people suspecting that Lindley might have been involved or even orchestrated it through someone else. This question lingered for nearly 3 years without any answers, leaving authorities with little progress in the investigation. In January 2020, the case took an unexpected, welcome turn. Brandon, who was in jail, decided to make a deal. He contacted the police to share what he knew about Ben's unsolved murder case, claiming he was closely involved. This prompted a renewed investigation. On January 16, 2020, the police arrested Lindley and Michael for murder, shocking their close friends. Sam felt relieved to finally learn the truth. However, investigators needed more evidence. They sought a witness who could provide crucial details. The detectives then arrested Ashley and explained her potential legal consequences. She could either align with Lindley and face severe charges as an accomplice or cooperate with the investigation, which could lead to Lindley being charged with first-degree murder. The authorities promised Ashley leniency if she agreed to cooperate. She ultimately revealed everything, from the harmful ingredients in the lethal cocktail to the details of the murder. Nonetheless, the murder weapon was still missing. By the end of 2021, Sam was preparing for the trials against the alleged murderers of his brother. He was mainly focused on staying composed throughout the process. Lindley's defense team was working hard to prevent Brandon's testimony from being included in the trial. The prosecution argued that Lindley had fired the gun and that Michael Humphrey was also part of the plan. The defense countered by claiming that Lindley had tricked Michael into coming to a snake farm by telling him she needed protection for a divorce discussion with Ben. They stated that Michael was caught off guard when Lindley suddenly pulled out a weapon and attacked Ben. Ultimately, the jury did not see Michael as an innocent witness and found him guilty of first-degree murder after several hours of deliberation. Facing a life sentence, Michael changed his account, claiming he had supplied the gun used by Lindley. He agreed to cooperate with the investigation in hopes of being released on parole. He guided the investigators to the murder weapon, which had been hidden in the attic of Lindley's mother's house. With the weapon recovered, the jury now had to address the lingering question: who actually pulled the trigger? The prosecution painted Lindley as a woman as cold-blooded as one of Ben's snakes, portraying her as a killer who attacked Ben and then continued her day as if nothing had happened. As the trial neared its conclusion, the defense made a bold move by allowing Lindley to recount the troubled and violent marriage she claimed she was escaping. However, she had no evidence to support her story, and there were no police reports documenting any physical abuse. Nearly 5 years had passed since Ben's murder, and a weary Sam awaited the jury's decision regarding Lindley. After 12 hours of deliberation, the judge delivered the verdict: Lindley Rennick was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Sam's disappointment with the sentence seemed to resonate with the judge, but Missouri state laws prevented any increase in the sentence. Lindley would become eligible for parole in 2035, and the charges against Brandon were dismissed. Ben's close friends still remember him as if he were alive. A new species of snake, called the Rennick ghost, was named in his honor. This snake is distinct for having fewer black spots, which gives it a ghostly appearance, a strong symbol of how much he meant to the community. They continue to miss him deeply, and at every event his friends attend, there is always an empty spot that can never be filled. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Alice Trapler. On April 19, 2012, an incident occurred in a remote area of upstate New York. At approximately 11 p.m., Frank Bennett called 911 to report that an intruder had broken into his home and killed his son, Daniel Bennett. After the attack, the intruder fled the scene. Frank reported that he did not witness the crime. He was in the basement when he heard the front door open and the lights turn on. A short time later, he heard a loud bang. Frank quickly ran upstairs, but when he reached the first floor, he only heard the sound of cars on the street. The mysterious intruder was gone, leaving behind a lifeless body. When the police arrived, they found Frank outside the house, in shock at what he had witnessed. The father could not believe that his beloved son was dead, and he was also afraid that the killer might return. After calming down, Frank's account was confirmed. The police entered the house and found Daniel lying on the sofa in the living room. It appeared that he had been attacked unexpectedly while he was sleeping. After examining the crime scene, forensic experts quickly discovered a spent ammunition box outside the door. It was clear that this was not a robbery because no valuables were missing, and there were no signs of a struggle or forced entry. The attacker had acted quickly, suggesting that the murder occurred in just a few seconds. However, the motive behind the crime remained unclear. Given the situation, the police suspected that it might be due to personal reasons. They began investigating Daniel's family and friends to gather more information. Frank suggested a possible motive for this violent act. His son was scheduled to appear in court the next day to fight for custody of his 5-month-old daughter, Lily. The divorce with Alice had been very difficult. Police considered Daniel's wife, Alice Trappler, to be the prime suspect in the case. Alice Trappler grew up in a small town called Edison. However, she was born in Philadelphia, where she lived with her parents before they bought a farm away from the city to raise their children. After graduating from high school, Alice moved away, attended college, and began working on a construction site in Texas. She eventually returned to Philadelphia and became a successful landscape designer. Alice was an energetic girl from a small town. As a child, she was a bit mischievous, but that did not affect her close relationship with her parents. She often drove 4 hours to Edison to visit them on weekends. During one of these visits, she met Thomas Wesley Borden, who became her first husband. This meeting took place in 2002. He had a troubled past, having dropped out of school in the 9th grade. Then a series of troubles began to plague him. Thomas often stole small items, had no steady job, and frequently worked as a repairman on local farms. This was his situation when he met Alice. He immediately fell in love with her vibrant and energetic personality. Thomas was attracted to Alice's natural beauty and intelligence. They had similar personalities, as they were both energetic and outgoing. At the time, Alice was in a relationship with another man, but she ended it for Thomas, and their romance quickly blossomed. Within 6 months, they were married and moved to Philadelphia, where Alice owned a house. Thomas supported Alice in everything. Alice had always dreamed of having a large family, but she struggled to conceive. Therefore, she took on the role of stepmother to Thomas's 2 daughters from a previous marriage. However, after only a few months of living together, Alice realized that she did not truly understand Thomas and had rushed into the marriage. At first, she tried to control their situation, but soon discovered that Thomas was unpredictable and irresponsible. He would often leave home for days at a time, leaving Alice and the children behind. This behavior frustrated Alice, while Thomas grew tired of her worries. Moreover, he showed little concern for Alice's feelings. Although she tried to maintain the marriage for 4 years, Alice eventually lost patience. She did not want to leave Thomas's children, to whom she was very attached, in the care of their irresponsible father. So, she filed for divorce and also requested custody. In 2009, a challenging trial began, with neither side willing to compromise. Finally, they reached an agreement that the girls would live with their paternal grandparents, who would take good care of them. Thomas's children still visit Alice in Edison regularly. After moving in with her mother in 2010, Alice bought an old farmhouse. She renovated the house, making use of her construction skills. Her business is thriving and is expected to grow even more in the near future. Overall, her life has improved significantly since the divorce. She has yet to realize her dream of having children of her own and rarely sees Thomas's children. Living alone has become boring for her. Her life changed dramatically when a new man, Daniel Bennett, entered her life. They met online in late 2010. He also grew up on a farm and is a strong man who always helps his parents with hard work. Daniel has a stubborn personality and can be rude, but he has never been in trouble with the law. In February 2011, Alice learned that she was pregnant. Overjoyed, she shared the news with Daniel, who was also delighted and decided to move in with her. They soon got married, but Alice's controlling nature soon emerged. She wanted to control every aspect of their lives, while Daniel valued his freedom and did not like being controlled. This led to frequent minor disagreements. These conflicts escalated, resulting in increasingly irrational arguments over small issues, which left Daniel frustrated. Just 6 months after meeting, the couple decided to split after Alice hit Daniel over the head with a coffee pot. He moved out, calling her crazy, and returned to live with his parents. However, Daniel still wanted to be involved in his daughter's life after she was born and sought to share custody, so he made an effort to maintain a relationship with Alice. Daniel contacted her almost every day to check on her well-being, but Alice never responded. She ignored all his messages, which frustrated him. Their relationship was strained. Alice often behaved rudely and even threatened him. She said that their communication felt like a conflict. In addition, she refused to see him and was hostile on the phone. It seemed that she did not want to maintain a relationship with him and did not want him to be a part of their child's life. 7 months after their separation, a baby girl was born. Alice did not inform Daniel about the birth and forbade him from seeing the child. This was a significant blow to Daniel, who had been pleading to see his daughter. However, Alice remained steadfast in her decision. So Daniel sought legal help to resolve the situation. According to the lawyer, the mother had no right to deny the father access to his daughter, but to prove this, a trial was necessary. Consequently, Daniel filed a lawsuit in family court to gain access to his child. The proceedings could be lengthy. Finally, a court date was set for April 20. This was a hopeful moment for Daniel, but the hearing never took place. He was murdered in his home the day before. Officers who arrived at the scene spoke to neighbors, some of whom confirmed hearing a loud bang just before an SUV drove away. The front door of the house was open, and Daniel was found dead. The only evidence was a spent 12-gauge cartridge case. A ballistics test is pending, which may provide further clues. Frank said that Daniel often complained about Alice's controlling behavior, especially after they split up when she forbade him from visiting their daughter. After breaking up with Alice, Daniel moved in with his father. On the day Daniel was killed, he was relaxing in front of the TV after a long day at work and fell asleep just before he was murdered. Frank also recalled that last Christmas, Alice called him out of the blue and asked to meet so he could see his granddaughter. He was delighted and agreed, but he used the opportunity to convince Alice to allow Daniel to see their child. He believed that children should have a relationship with both their father and mother. However, Alice became defensive and firmly stated that she would never allow Daniel to see their child. Frank was extremely upset, feeling that Alice's decision was both illegal and unjustified. He believed that Daniel would make a great father and saw no justification for Alice's restrictions. After Alice's call, Daniel sought legal help and went to court, but his hearing was repeatedly postponed until it was rescheduled. Tragically, a murderer disrupted all his plans. The police quickly established a motive for the crime, believing that the connection was not random. First, they needed to talk to Alice, who arrived at the courthouse at around 5 a.m., the day after the murder. Just hours later, Lily's custody hearing took place. The police considered her the prime suspect, and at that time, she was living in Edison, 30 kilometers from the scene of the tragedy. Alice was surprisingly calm when she heard the news of her ex-husband's death. When the police spoke to Alice, it was clear that she was very angry with him. She recounted that he had often insulted her and had been abusive throughout their time together. Alice described Daniel as a bad person who struggled with drug addiction. She also mentioned that they were in a custody battle over their daughter, a legal struggle that Daniel had initiated, and that she was determined not to give in to him. Despite this hostility, Alice insisted that she had nothing to do with the murder. She claimed that she had an alibi for the time of the incident, stating that she was at home with her mother, who later confirmed her story. When asked about a handgun, Alice denied ever having used it, and the police confirmed that the weapon was not registered in her name. However, this did not eliminate her as a suspect, as she could have purchased the weapon illegally, and her alibi was not entirely reliable. Unfortunately, the police were unable to find any information that could advance the case. They then chose to investigate Daniel's other acquaintances and friends who might have had a motive for the crime. Many described Daniel as a difficult person who frequently got into fights at bars. As a result, the police identified several potential suspects who had conflicts with Daniel in various ways. They compiled a long list of these individuals and began interviewing them. Although each had grievances against Daniel, none had a strong motive for the murder. The investigation was losing momentum, and it was clear that a vital lead was needed, as there were too many angry residents in the city who might want to take revenge on him. It was necessary to narrow down the list of suspects. One of Daniel's neighbors went to the police station after the murder. While she was getting the mail, she discovered a shotgun shell casing on the road. Concerned, she reported her discovery to the sheriff's department. At first glance, the shell casing did not seem unusual since hunting season had just begun, and many people in rural areas used that type of ammunition. However, because it was close to the crime scene, it had the potential to be important evidence. When the police arrived, they compared the shell casing to the one that caused Daniel's death. They found that they were an exact match. The police were then able to trace the shell casing to the store where it was purchased. They searched the area around where the shell casing was found and discovered 3 more shell casings. All of these had been purchased from the hunting section of a local Walmart. This discovery provided a vital lead in the investigation. The police requested surveillance footage from the store and reviewed it. They identified a man who had purchased the boxes of ammunition just 4 hours before the murder, around 7 p.m. The footage clearly showed him, and the police were able to track him as he left the store, including his license plate, thanks to outdoor cameras. The police quickly identified the owner of one of the vehicles as Thomas West Borden, Alice's first husband. While this footage was not enough to convict him, it was a clue for the police to investigate Thomas further. They had 2 main suspects, Alice and Thomas. It was likely that they had planned to kill Daniel together. While Thomas could be considered a potential perpetrator or accomplice, the only evidence against him was the purchase of the ammunition. Alice was not officially considered a suspect because she had an alibi confirmed by her mother. The GPS on her phone showed that she was at home, but the seasoned police officer suspected that she might be the mastermind behind the events. The police contacted Thomas, asking him to come to the station for questioning without providing a specific reason. They hoped to indirectly confirm their suspicions through him. However, Thomas informed the police over the phone that he was out of town at the time of the call. He could not provide an exact date for his return, saying that he could be absent for 2 weeks to a month due to important business. He then stated that unless the police had a warrant for his arrest, he had no intention of going to the police station over a minor matter. This situation raised suspicion, and he understood why they wanted to talk to him. As the phone conversation continued, Thomas became increasingly anxious. At one point, he suddenly declared that he would kill himself if the pressure did not ease. The police realized the urgency of the situation and knew that they needed to quickly locate Thomas before he did anything drastic. They decided to track the GPS location of the call and found him near a cell tower in a suburb of Philadelphia, along with his car. Soon, the pursuit began. The chase lasted only a few blocks before Thomas abandoned his pickup truck in a parking lot and fled on foot. However, another police unit arrived to stop him. Thomas gave a false name, but when asked for identification, he surrendered his driver's license. When the officers discovered the lie, they acted quickly to arrest him. Thomas began to run away again, leading several cars and police officers to chase him. They pursued him to the nearest train tracks, possibly because he intended to use the train to escape and distract the police. However, Thomas was exhausted and realized that he could not outrun them. In a moment of desperation, he jumped in front of a train and took his own life. Some even blamed the police for his death. This development left the police without their only lead regarding Daniel's murder. In their desperation, the police decided to talk to people who had interacted with Thomas in the days before his death. Thomas's half-brother Nathan Hand lived with him. Shortly before Daniel's murder, Thomas had moved in with Nathan, and they spent a lot of time together. During this period, Thomas rekindled his relationship with Alice and felt happy, as he had struggled to cope with their breakup. He had hoped to reunite with her, so he agreed to resume contact. However, Nathan suspected that Alice had an ulterior motive for returning to Thomas. Nathan said that just before the incident, Alice had made a request regarding Daniel. For the sake of the person he loved, Thomas agreed to everything and followed Alice's instructions. Nathan recalled that at around 8 p.m. on April 19, Thomas returned from Walmart and quickly began preparing for something important, saying that he would confront Daniel at Alice's request. Nathan observed that Thomas was wearing camouflage pants, a dark shirt, and a mask. When asked about his plans, Thomas insisted that he would confront Daniel. Nathan tried to dissuade him, but to no avail. Thomas asked Nathan to drive him to Daniel's house. During the drive, Thomas revealed that he not only intended to beat Daniel, but also to kill him. He was determined to get rid of Daniel once and for all, despite Nathan's attempts to convince him otherwise. Thomas also mentioned that this plan originated with Alice. He kept in touch with her throughout the evening via phone and text messages. When they arrived at Daniel's house around 11 p.m., Thomas retrieved the weapons from the trunk of the car. He claimed that Alice had given him the weapons for this purpose and that he had purchased the ammunition. They got out of the car and stood on either side of the front door. Nathan pushed the door open and turned on the lights, allowing Thomas to rush inside and kill Daniel. They then fled the scene, jumping into the car and driving away. As they left, Thomas threw the remaining shell casings out the window, landing in a neighbor's yard and eventually leading the police to their door. Nathan claimed that they buried the weapons at the park. Police were able to locate the weapon based on Nathan's description. He also mentioned that Alice was not present during the attack. She was at home and was in contact with Thomas on the phone. Nathan was arrested in connection with the crime. On April 24, a deputy sheriff visited Alice's home, and she denied any involvement in the crime. In 2013, Alice went to trial for the murder of Daniel Bennett. She was charged with multiple crimes, facing a possible sentence of 15 years to life in prison. By this time, Thomas, the real perpetrator, was dead. The prosecution argued that he was just a pawn controlled by the real mastermind behind the crime. They believed that Alice had planned and manipulated Thomas into carrying out the act. The prosecution gathered a significant amount of evidence that linked Alice to the crime. Evidence included correspondence between her and Thomas discussing the case, as well as surveillance camera footage showing Thomas purchasing ammunition. Additionally, Thomas's half-brother Nathan confirmed Alice's involvement in the crime. Nathan Hand reached a plea deal to shorten his sentence by pleading guilty to manslaughter in exchange for helping to solve the case, resulting in a 9-year prison sentence. The defense attempted to exonerate Alice, acknowledging her hostility toward Daniel. They argued that the situation was an act of self-defense, claiming that Alice had endured domestic violence for 6 months. They asserted that Alice, a victim of violence as a child, was determined to prevent her daughter from experiencing the same, which explained her strong opposition to sharing custody with Daniel. After deliberations, the jury unanimously convicted Alice Trappler of premeditated murder. She was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Throughout the trial, she remained calm, showing no remorse or emotion. Alice expressed dissatisfaction with her 25-year prison sentence and filed several appeals, all of which were rejected.